These two men were once close as brothers. Now, the elder one, with tears in his eyes, is apologizing, saying he's willing to make up for everything to his younger brother. But the younger brother locks the elder's hands and suddenly pushes him against the wall, even ripping his shirt. "How about we do this, brother?" Xiao Yi, the veins on the elder brother's forehead slightly bulging, stopped joking. But the next second, the younger brother fiercely bumps into him, causing Zhou Quanfan to wince in pain. But the shock in his heart far exceeds the physical pain. He asks himself, how did Xiao Yi, the polite younger brother I raised, become like this? Did I really make a mistake 6 years ago? Zhou Quanfan, once a retired movie star turned film school teacher, didn't want to attend the banquet that night. But he went reluctantly because the director, Li Yian, who had invited him, had done him a favor in the past. The banquet was held in a top-floor presidential suite of a 6-star hotel. Director Li got straight to the point, asking Zhou Quanfan to help direct the lead actor in a new project. Zhou Quanfan was about to refuse when the evening's main character made his entrance. From the corner of the room, an impatient voice lazily said, "Stop it, or I'll have everyone kicked out." A man was seen lounging on a sofa, legs crossed, with a jacket covering his face, revealing only his thin lips and handsome chin. Li Yian then whispered to Zhou Quanfan, "Bear with it, it's the new sponsor, the young master of fussy film industry, Fu Yunyi." Zhou Quanfan was shocked. Li Yian, always a major figure, what kind of sponsor could make even him bow? This was until the man lifted his jacket. A youthful and stern face appeared, the dark circles under his eyes suggesting he didn't sleep well last night. However, Zhou Quanfan's heart skipped a beat at the sight of Yunyi. Zhou Quanfan was completely frozen, staring intently at the somewhat familiar yet strange face. Finally, Zhou Quanfan broke the silence. "Xiao Yi," he called out to the handsome face, hesitantly adding, "Is that you?" The person on the sofa slowly lifted their eyes and sneered with a slight tug at the corner of their lips. "It's been a long time." Zhou Qingfan. After Fu Yunyi finished speaking, he put on his jacket and stood up. Zhou Quanfan's eyes flickered with joy as he approached. "It really is you. I thought I had mistaken someone else." He noticed the boy's impressively tall stature and chuckled, "You've grown taller. And changed a lot." Zhou Quanfan, at 181 centimeters, was considered tall among men, but Fu Yunyi stood even taller, at least 187 centimeters. "Let's take a walk," Fu Yunyi suggested, looking expressionlessly at Zhou Quanfan. "Sure," Zhou Quanfan nodded. He still felt happiness in his heart. After all, this was the younger brother he had raised for 7 years. The two came to a small courtyard outside the dining room. Zhou Quanfan immediately asked with concern, "Xiao Yi, have you been doing well after you left?" But before he could finish, Fu Yunyi leaned in aggressively and said coldly, "Hey, doing well? Yeah, so well that I suffered abuse and imprisonment. And all of this is because you heartlessly sold me to the Fu family, my dear brother. Tell me, how are you going to compensate me?" Zhou Quanfan didn't expect things to turn out this way. He could only keep apologizing. "I'm sorry, I didn't know they would treat you like that. Xiao Yi, please don't be angry with your brother. Tell me what you want me to do. I'm willing to do anything to make you feel better." So there was the opening scene. The once obedient and clingy puppy had become a domineering and tyrannical big wolf dog in a few years. Zhou Quanfan struggled hard after being gagged. But Fu Yunyi's slender hands were like tiger pliers, tightly binding his wrists, making him unable to move at all. When Zhou Quanfan realized he wanted to take further steps to conquer, he couldn't stand the horror inside and pushed him away hard. "Xiao Yi, do you know what you are doing?" Zhou Quanfan couldn't believe the person in front of him was the gentle younger brother he had lived with for 7 years. Fu Yunyi, with a soft look in his eyes, wiped his lips. "Of course I know what I am doing." Then suddenly he pushed Zhou Quanfan away violently, turned his head, and said in an innocent lowered voice, "Director Li, you saw everything just now, right? This person forced himself on me. Does such a person deserve to be my teacher?" Zhou Quanfan felt a chill in his heart and suddenly looked up, only to see director Li Yian and the producer standing not far away with grim faces. Clearly, Fu Yunyi had known for a long time that this group of people were standing behind them. You were acting just now?" Zhou Quanfan was once again shocked by the person before him. Can people really change this much? After 7 years, the boy who once timidly smiled at him to curry favor has become a cunning and unpredictable adult. Zhou Quanfan, Li Yian stormed up to him, yanking him away. "You've got some nerve. Just a washed-up movie star, and yet you dare to mess with the young master of the Fu family? Men, beat him up for me." Zhou Quanfan stood there in disbelief until several men in black suits approached him step by step. Only then did he believe that Fu Yunyi really intended to beat him up. Zhou Guangfan was no match for them and was soon beaten to the ground. He curled up into a ball, unable to move. Li Yian walked over to Fu Yunyi ingratiatingly, chuckling, "Young Master Fu, you see, beating him up like this should be enough, right? If we really beat him to death." Zhou Guangfan was in such pain that he could only grit his teeth, clutching his chest as if his ribs were broken, gasping for breath. Fu Yunyi slowly walked up to the man. He gently squatted down to look at this man whom he had loved so deeply and now hated so much. A necklace with a ring hanging from it caught his attention. "Whose ring is this?" Fu Yunyi suddenly lifted the ring and asked. Zhou Guangfan's eyes flickered momentarily, and after a pause, he blurted out, "Someone gave it to me." "Someone gave it to you?" Fu Yunyi chuckled twice. "A woman?" Zhou Guangfan responded with a "Hmm." "It's quite pretty," Fu Yunyi said softly, feeling the ring's texture. "She has good taste." With a loud snap, Fu Yunyi finished speaking and then viciously yanked off the delicate chain from the man's neck. The chain was fragile and snapped easily. He slipped the ring onto his own middle finger. "I think this ring looks good. I'll keep it and wear it. You can buy another one." "Fu Yunyi," Zhou Guangfan lifted his head and roared, "Can you stop messing around? Why? Do you hate me so much?" The boy's delicate eyebrows flashed with harshness. "Yeah, why did I become like this?" Fu Yunyi's light words carried over with the evening wind. "I wasn't like this originally. I once had a brother who loved me. He gave me a home, sent me to school, and made me feel what it's like to have family and friends for the first time. I was addicted to this happiness. But it all disappeared. The priceless happiness I cherished was sold for millions. 6 years ago, when you sold me, shouldn't you have anticipated this day, my dear brother? If you found a stray child on the roadside, and you knew he was the young master of a billionaire family, would you keep him or send him back home?" Zhou Guangfan chose to send him back, thinking it was for his good, not realizing that due to his special status as an illegitimate child, he would be hurt so deeply. He still remembers the first time he saw Fu Yunyi. The kid was just over 5 years old, filthy all over, squatting at his doorstep like a little mud man. Such a small child alone outside, covered in wounds, even hungry enough to pick food off the ground to eat. Without thinking, he said, "Do you want to come home with me?" That's how it started. From the age of 13, Zhou Guangfan always had a shadow trailing behind him whether he was going to school or going out to play. "The kid who keeps calling me big bro this and big bro that," Fu Yunyi, stayed at our place for 7 years. Until one day, a lawyer came and told us the boy was no ordinary person. Our small temple couldn't accommodate him. If we truly wanted what's best for him and to give him a better future, we should send him back to where he came from. After much deliberation, Zhou Guangfan decided to send the child back to his real home. After all, he didn't belong here. He had his own family and his own father. Coming from a wealthy and prestigious family, he should be enjoying the life of a young master, not living the common life with us. So, he agreed to send him back, but only after his 12th birthday. Zhou Guangfan still remembers that day. He bought a cake and picked him up from school to celebrate his birthday. Fu Yunyi was particularly happy, holding his hand all the way home, excitedly talking about how much cake he would eat. But just as we reached the crossroads on the way home, a group of men in black suits got out of a black sedan. They respectfully said to him, "Mr. Zhou, thank you for your hard work these days and for taking such good care of the young master." After speaking, they handed him a check, saying, "Here is 5 million as a reward, a token of our gratitude." Before Zhou Guangfan could refuse, the leader in the black suit forcibly stuffed the check into his hand and then took Fu Yunyi away. Zhou Guangfan has actually forgotten most of the details of that day. After all, it was 6 years ago. But there's one detail he remembers vividly, the look in Fu Yunyi's eyes when he left, like a little fierce wolf, deeply etched in his heart. "Ha, you have no idea how much abuse I endured as an illegitimate child in the Fu family, how many times I wished for death. You took their money and sold me out. In your eyes, Zhou Guangfan, have I always just been a commodity worth 5 million? Xiao Yi," Zhou Guangfan said anxiously, "I've never thought of using you. That so-called 5 million, I really don't want it. Where's the money?" Fu Yunyi interrupted him, "If you don't want it, where's that 5 million now? Have you returned it?" Zhou Guangfan let out a long sigh and collapsed to the ground. "The money. It's almost all spent." Zhou Guangfan didn't elaborate further, but he really had no choice. As soon as Fu Yunyi left, his mother was diagnosed with gastric cancer, requiring a huge sum for treatment. He had to use that 5 million. Money can save a life. Faced with life and dignity, he chose to let his mother live. Seeing the man silent, Fu Yunyi gave a bitter smile. "You tell me you didn't use me, yet you turned around and spent all that money. Zhou Guangfan, how do you expect me to believe you?" Zhou Guangfan remained silent, with nothing to say. Fu Yanyi stared at his face, his hatred growing by the second. Eventually, he said coldly, "I'll keep this ring. Go back and compliment your girlfriend for me, she has good taste." Zhou Guangfan, enduring the pain in his body, stood up and desperately grabbed hold of Fu Yanyi, his body trembling, almost begging, "That ring is really important to me, please." This little puppy turned into a big wolf, demanding the beautiful brother to pay off his debts. After a fit of unrestrained fury, he even snatched a ring hanging from a necklace. Seeing Zhou Guangfan's anxious appearance, Fu Yanyi sneered, "It's not an engagement ring, is it?" Zhou Guangfan hesitated for a moment, and before he could respond directly, Fu Yanyi let out a sarcastic laugh. "I was wondering why you were so anxious. It turns out to be a love token." Well then, he suddenly got a bit angry for some reason and then threw the ring away. Zhou Guangfan turned pale. "Fu Yanyi, does this make you feel satisfied? What grudge have I to resolve?" Fu Yanyi wiped his hands with a tissue and said indifferently, "Between us there's no grudge, only debts. Zhou Guangfan, this is what you owe me." After saying that, the boy threw the tissue in front of Zhou Guangfan and walked away. Fu Yanyi didn't leave immediately, he sat in a black Maybach parked by the road and quietly waited. 10 minutes later, a man wearing a black suit approached the car window and said, "Young master, it has been found." Afterwards, he respectfully handed a ring inside. Fu Yanyi took it. The small silver ring shimmered under the moonlight as the boy rubbed the ring's texture. Engraved on the inside of the ring were the English letters Love ZQ. Fu Yanyi lowered his eyes, a trace of mockery flitted through his delicate features. He mused, "How endearing Zhou Guangfan is, truly nauseating." Fu Yanyi slid the ring onto his middle finger, then said to the driver, "Let's go back to the Fu family villa. Although I really want to drag that person over now and torment them in the palm of my hand, the time is not right. Let him return to recuperate for a couple of days." "Dad, what happened to you?" As soon as he got home, a little boy no taller than a meter came running toward Zhou Guangfan. Zhou Guangfan held the child's small hand and forced a smile. "I'm fine, I just fell while giving a lecture." Chao Xiaonan sighed, "Dad, I'm not a 3 or 4-year-old child anymore. I'm about to start elementary school. You can't fool me with such lies anymore." Zhou Guangfan laughed. The gloom and entanglement caused by Fu Yanyi vanished, leaving warmth in his heart. This boy named Chao Xiaonan was adopted by Zhou Guangfan at the request of a deceased friend. Or rather, they comforted each other. When Chao Xiaonan was brought home from the hospital, he was only 4 months old. A man in his 20s, with hardly any romantic experience. Raising a newborn baby. The difficulties and troubles they've faced over the years are countless. But more than the troubles were the moments of comfort. Zhou Guangfan has always raised Chao Xiaonan like his own son. He considers Xiaonan, aside from Fu Yanyi and his mother, his only family. Chao Xiaonan seemed to sense the unusual sorrow in the man. So he lifted his small arm and patted the man's shoulder. "Don't be sad, Dad. Pain is temporary. When you fall, you need to get up on your own and be strong. This is what you taught me. Stay strong, that's what you taught me." Zhou Guangfan smiled, "Yes, stay strong, let's go." He gently took the little boy's hand. "I'll take you to bed." After guarding Xiaonan until he fell asleep, Zhou Guangfan left. Just as he closed the door, his phone suddenly vibrated. It was a text message from Li Yian. He said the people he sent couldn't find the ring, but they saw Fu Yanyi's bodyguards with flashlights taking something away. Zhou Guangfan was stunned for a moment, then his eyes glinted as he quickly took out his phone. He dialed a number he had memorized by heart. After a long series of beeps, a deep voice came from the other end. "Hey," Fu Yanyi sneered, "amazing, after 7 years of no contact, you finally decided to call me." The meaningful ring was snatched away by the younger brother like a wolf dog. The beautiful elder brother humbly called to ask for it back, but the other party made a capricious little demand. After receiving Li Yian's text, Zhou Guangfan called Fu Yanyi directly, cutting to the chase, "The ring is with you, right?" "I threw it away." Fu Yanyi raised his hand, staring at the ring flashing coldly under the light, and said lightly, "Xiao Yi, don't mess around. That ring isn't worth much. It's useless for you to keep it. But I like to see you desperately angry," Fu Yanyi said calmly. "What do you really want to do?" Zhou Guangfan asked helplessly. Fu Yanyi finally spoke up, "I'm about to start filming a drama soon. It's a gig arranged by Fu Wanlin. As you know, I'm not like you, I can't live life as if it's a play and act it out so well. So now, I need you to be my teacher and teach me how to act." Zhou Guangfan gripped his phone tightly. "I'm teaching at the Film Academy right now, I can't make the time." Fu Yanyi's temper flared, "Can't make time? Then I'll throw your ring into the toilet. Let's try again, can you make time now?" Left with no other choice, Zhou Guangfan sighed. Why must you be so persistent? It's just teaching you how to act, right? Fine. Fu Yanyi sneered, if you had been cooperative from the start, maybe we wouldn't have had so many conflicts. Zhou Guangfan gritted his teeth. I've already agreed, so when will you give me back my ring? Ah Jia, the comic narrator, explained as Fu Yanyi casually said, once we've signed the contract, I'll return it to you. And you'd better start listening to me, Fu Yanyi said coldly, enunciating every word. You got beaten up today, does it hurt now? Zhou Guangfan's mouth twitched. It's fine. I went to the hospital for a checkup, no bones or tendons were hurt. Don't talk back to me again. What I say goes. I have a bad temper and I'm prone to hitting people, Fu Yanyi's voice lowered. I don't want tonight's incident to happen again. Zhou Guangfan frowned. What incident? Fu Yanyi yelled, the incident where you pushed me away. With that, the boy hung up the call. Zhou Guangfan stared blankly at his phone screen, and it took him a while to realize that when Fu Yanyi was clinging to him earlier, he had pushed him away. So what do you want me to do? Zhou Guangfan asked through clenched teeth, staring at the phone. Do you expect me to hug you and kiss you back like when we were kids? After hanging up, Fu Yanyi called over a man. He handed him a piece of paper and asked him to craft a silver ring according to the design on it. After the man left, he took out the ring again, constantly touching the small words inscribed on the inner band, Love, Zhou Qing. 2 days later, after Zhou Guangfan finished his classes and returned to his office, he heard the girls around talking about a guy in his office who was even more handsome and seemed wealthier than him. When he went back to check, he found Fu Yanyi sitting in the office chair. He leaned back, spun the chair around, looked around, and said with a huff, Zhou Guangfan, you're almost in your 30s. How come you still work in such a tiny, shabby office? Zhou Guangfan felt a sudden blockage in his heart and said through clenched teeth, cut the nonsense. What are you doing here? Seeing him talk back, Fu Yanyi was almost ignited again. But seeing the redness in the man's eyes and remembering how he had almost beaten him up the other day, he thought it unnecessary to personally bother teaching him a lesson today. So, with a cold snort, he took out a stack of papers from his bag, threw them on the table, and said, sign the contract. The wolf dog little brother is blackmailing the beautiful brother with his token of love, forcing him to sign a contract to be his man. Zhou Guangfan insisted, I'll sign the contract, but give me back my ring first. Fu Yanyi's eyes flashed with mockery. A lousy little ring, you think I fancy it that much? Saying this, he threw a ring box out. Zhou Guangfan quickly picked up the box and took out the ring. But he discovered the inscription inside the ring was gone. Give me back mine, this is not my ring. Fu Yanyi revealed his hands proudly and said, I told you, that ring looks nice. I want to keep it and wear it. Zhou Guangfan stepped forward, grabbed Fu Yanyi's wrist, and demanded, give me back that engraved ring. Fu Yanyi gritted his teeth, what engraving? Love Zhou Guangfan, right? So precious, engraved by your girlfriend herself. How nauseatingly sweet. This statement made Zhou Guangfan pause. He recalled the past he did not wish to remember. The ring's owner was not his girlfriend, but Chao Xiaonan's deceased biological sister, Chao Yuting. She had shielded Zhou Guangfan with her body in a car accident and saved his life, but she herself was fatally wounded and died. As she was dying, Chao Yuxin took out the ring and whispered weakly, Guangfan, I know you've always seen me as a sister, but I've always liked you. I wanted to give it to you tonight, muster up the courage to confess to you. Zhou Guangfan also vividly remembered Chao Yuting's last 2 requests. One was to take good care of Xiaonan, and the other was not to forget her and not to fall in love with anyone easily. Lost in his memories, Zhou Guangfan did not speak. Fu Yanyi thought he was conceding and said coldly, a bit displeased, I'm going to keep and wear this ring. Don't even think about getting it back. Zhou Guangfan sighed, if you want to wear it, keep it. But take good care of it. A flash of surprise crossed the boy's eyes, seemingly not expecting Zhou Guangfan to agree just like that. Then, Fu Yanyi instantly softened his tone, much more pleasantly, then let's sign the contract. Zhou Guangfan was also taken aback for a moment, then picked up a pen and signed on the contract. A week later, Zhou Guangfan took a 3-month advance leave from the academy and joined the film crew with Fu Yanyi. When he carried his suitcase into the room Fu Yanyi had prepared for him, he was a bit stunned. This is too big, it can house 5 or 6 people. Fu Yanyi crossed his arms and proudly said, see? Stick with me, and you'll be well fed. Zhou Guangfan's temple twitched as he cursed himself inwardly for speaking out of turn, allowing this brat to look down on him again. Fu Yanyi was still reveling in pride when he suddenly leaned in with a cold voice, just follow me obediently from now on, you won't suffer any losses. Zhou Guangfan's temple turned blue, can you not speak as if I'm some kept lover of yours? Fu Yanyi stiffened, his face turning red. Suddenly, he cursed under his breath, "Shameless old thing," and then turned and ran into the bathroom. Zhou Guangfan watched his flustered back, and couldn't help but laugh out loud. It seemed that no matter how obnoxious he acted, my brother, who I hadn't seen for many years, was still a kid at heart who couldn't handle teasing. He had changed, yet he hadn't. Sitting in the living room and reading a book, Zhou Guangfan finally couldn't sit still when he realized Fu Yunyi had been in the bathroom for almost an hour. He stood up, walked to the bathroom door, knocked, and said, "Yi, it's summer. A quick shower is enough, staying in there too long can be suffocating. I know, it's so annoying." The sound of the water faucet in the bathroom stopped, and then the door was suddenly pushed open. Zhou Guangfan didn't expect him to come out so quickly and bumped into him full on, their eyes locking. Zhou Guangfan sighed in his heart, admiring such a lotus flower emerging from the water. At the bathroom door, the handsome brother bumped into the wolf dog brother who had just finished his shower. Seeing the boy's moist and translucent appearance, Zhou Guangfan's eyes widened, and it took him a while before he said, "You really were born in the wrong body. If you were a little girl, you might have been a nation-toppling beauty, causing calamity to the country and its people." Fu Yunyi's eyes flickered, and he suddenly pushed the man away, coldly saying, "Who exactly was born in the wrong body? Almost 30 and still not as tall as me, you old thing." Zhou Guangfan felt a tightness in his chest. "Xiaoyi, you are wrong about this. My height is the perfect male standard. Besides, height and masculinity are two different things." As Zhou Guangfan spoke, he realized that Fu Yunyi's gaze was directed oddly, and awkwardly asked, "What are you staring at?" Fu Yunyi suddenly faced the man and retorted, "Not just in height. I'm also bigger than you in other places." Zhou Guangfan's embarrassment skyrocketed. No man could withstand such comparative provocation. Fu Yunyi stepped closer, observing the boy's shifting gaze. Zhou Guangfan felt his body stiffen, unable to move, until Fu Yunyi whispered in his ear, "Bro, when I was 8, I was already about the same as you." Zhou Guangfan was suddenly jolted. Since he was young, he had noticed Fu Yunyi's exceptional talent. While bathing him, he had marveled inwardly, knowing the child would grow up to be an outstanding figure. "The director wants to discuss the script with you. Go now." Zhou Guangfan coughed and awkwardly changed the subject, "I'm still waiting to take a shower." Fu Yunyi turned around, a bit impatiently, "Got it, so annoying. Go take your shower then." Zhou Guangfan breathed a sigh of relief, couldn't help but lament that taking care of a kid was really exhausting. After quickly showering under the spray, Zhou Guangfan realized there was no shower gel left in the bathroom, frowning slightly. He tentatively called out for Xiao Yi twice, but no one responded. Zhou Guangfan then grabbed a towel, planning to go out and find him himself. But just after wiping his body, a boy's impatient voice suddenly came from the bathroom doorway, "Why are you calling me?" Zhou Guangfan was startled. "When did you come back? We're out of body wash in here. Can you get me a bottle?" Fu Yunyi was holding a bottle of body wash in his hand and said indifferently, "Sure, but you have to beg me." Zhou Guangfan felt his blood pressure surge. Is this kid still stuck at the age of 7 or 8? Is he just childish or in the late stages of adolescent syndrome? He decided not to stoop to his level, reminding himself that he was an adult nearing 30 and the kid was only 18. Getting angry at him wasn't worth it. "Please," Zhou Guangfan said without hesitation. "Young Master Fu, please give me the body wash." Fu Yunyi raised an eyebrow slightly. "Good boy, call me brother then." Fu Yunyi. After a furious shout, the door suddenly opened with a bang. Without another word, Zhou Guangfan came out and snatched the body wash from the boy's hand. Fu Yunyi didn't expect Zhou Guangfan to rush out. The man was simply draped in a bathrobe, revealing his healthy, honey-colored skin and beautifully sculpted muscles. Fu Yunyi's eyes turned red and he couldn't help but stare in a daze. Bang! The door quickly closed again. Fu Yunyi snapped out of it and growled through gritted teeth, "Quick to close the door, huh? As if anyone wants to look at you, old man." After Zhou Guangfan finished his shower and was drying his hair in the bedroom, Fu Yunyi was leaning against the headboard reading a script. "What time is it?" Zhou Guangfan asked, a bit worried as he glanced at the clock. "You can read the script tomorrow morning. There's no need to stay up late. It's bad for your eyes." The truth was, he couldn't help but feel a little tender-hearted. No matter how badly Fu Yunyi treated him, he found himself instinctively wanting to care for him. After all, Fu Yunyi had called him brother for 7 or 8 years. Zhou Guangfan walked up to the boy and said, "Do you want me to help you analyze the script? What do you think?" Fu Yunyi lifted his eyes. Zhou Guangfan shrugged his shoulders, "For a genius like you, it shouldn't be necessary." After saying this, he pretended to turn and leave. Unexpectedly, Fu Yunyi grabbed his hand and pulled him to his side. "Don't go, Brother. Zhou Quanfan stumbled by the bedside. And ended up sitting down in an awkward position. What are you doing? Zhou Quanfan complained. He had injured his waist while filming, and the stumble almost caused him to twist it again. Fu Yunyi didn't know about this. He snorted, aren't we supposed to talk about the script? How can we talk if you don't come closer? Alright, Zhou Quanfan said helplessly, I'll come closer and talk to you. But when Zhou Quanfan leaned back on the bed and got closer, Fu Yunyi's body instead stiffened up, as nervous as a newlywed bride. Zhou Quanfan didn't notice his nervousness at all. He flipped through the script outline on his own and frowned, saying, this character spans a wide age range, from 18 or 19 to old age. It's not easy. Let's talk about your view of the protagonist's personality when he was young. Do you have any opinions? Fu Yunyi was taken aback for a moment and pursed his lips. What opinions could I have? He's just a rich young master, right? What kind of rich young master? Zhou Quanfan pressed on, he must have some personality. There are many types of rich young masters. Refined, upright, naive. If you don't give the character a precise definition, how can you portray him well? Fu Yunyi's eyes flashed, he turned his head and said, I don't know. What do you mean you don't know? Zhou Quanfan's anger rose. Having been a teacher for so long, he couldn't stand students who were not motivated and didn't listen to their teachers. You're going to shoot tomorrow, and now you still don't have a grip on your character's personality. What are you going to act with? Fu Yunyi kept a cold face and didn't answer, his eyes fixed on the window outside. Look at me. Zhou Quanfan pinched his chin, forcing the boy to turn his face towards him and frowned. Is the answer written on the windowsill? Fu Yunyi gritted his teeth. Old man, I'm not your student. Don't lecture me with your methods. I don't need to learn, Fu Yunyi said through clenched teeth, pausing between each word. This face of mine is enough. Zhou Quanfan felt a pang of heartache. Since you were young, I feared this face would be your downfall. I always worried that you'd think you're good looking, so you wouldn't have to do anything else. You indeed became arrogant just because you have a good looking face. Fu Yunyi's eyes flashed, and he coldly snorted, now you start to care about me? What were you doing earlier, Zhou Quanfan? Let me tell you clearly, I've already turned bad. The atmosphere suddenly turned cold. Zhou Quanfan felt as if his heart had been drenched in lemon juice. Zhou Quanfan felt like his heart was soaked in lemon juice, sour, aching, and regretful. After a long silence, Zhou Quanfan finally mustered the courage to break it. During those years abroad, there wasn't anyone by your side? Anyone? Ah, Cao Man Mian Yue. Fu Yunyi squinted his eyes and said, even my brother, whom I thought I could always trust, didn't want me. How could you expect others to take care of me? Zhou Quanfan's heart trembled. Xiao Yi. Fu Yunyi turned his head, glaring at him fiercely, so now I've turned bad. Zhou Quanfan, remember this. I've turned bad because of you. Zhou Quanfan felt a mix of emotions, sour, sweet, bitter, and spicy, regret flooding his heart. He regretted being so impulsive back then. Even if he had to send him away, he should have asked for his consent first. Acting on his own wasn't for his good but harmed him. Just as Zhou Quanfan and Fu Yunyi arrived at the set, Li Yian came up, smiling charmingly, and extended his hand. Young Master Fu, you're here early. I'll immediately arrange for an assistant to help you change clothes. Fu Yunyi interrupted naturally, no need, Mr. Zhou can help me change. Zhou Quanfan quickly looked at Fu Yunyi, what nonsense. I'm your acting coach. Changing clothes should be the assistant's job. Before Fu Yunyi could show his displeasure, Li Yian quickly stepped in with a laugh. Mr. Zhou, there's a lot going on in the crew, we shouldn't be too rigid about duties. Just take him to change quickly. Resigned, Zhou Quanfan waited outside the dressing room, lamenting how the former movie emperor had turned into a newbie's assistant. He glanced at his watch from time to time. It's been over 20 minutes. Isn't he done yet? Zhou Quanfan urged from outside, are you done? The shoot is about to start. Why is this button so difficult to fasten? As the fitting room curtain is pulled open, Fu Yunyi emerges wearing a pale blue changpao of a rich young master from the Republic era. Zhou Quanfan stares at him, lost in thought for a moment, before sincerely saying, it suits you very well. Come here and fasten this button for me. Fu Yunyi immediately pulls Zhou Quanfan over. You can't be hasty with these kinds of buttons. If you tear it, it would be such a waste, the man says as he raises his hand. He carefully fiddles with the button below the other's neck. When fastening the top one, Zhou Quanfan inevitably touches the boy's Adam's apple, feeling its pulsing bulge. Zhou Quanfan's movements stiffen, and he feels a numbness run down his spine. Fu Yunyi brushes the man's hand away with a chuckle, old thing, where is your hand touching? Zhou Quanfan quickly lowers his hands and awkwardly smiles, there, it's fastened. Fu Yunyi's ink-black eyes stare intently at him. When you touched my Adam's apple just now, why was your heartbeat so fast? Zhou Guangfan glares back. When did my heart beat fast? Fu Yunyi presses with a threatening undertone. Old thing, stop pretending, I heard it. Zhou Guangfan gives a bitter smile. I was just surprised at how much you've grown. You used to ask me why you didn't have an Adam's apple when you were younger. Who would have thought that after all these years, the child has grown into an adult? Fu Yunyi's gaze deepens. Is that all you thought about? Zhou Guangfan, taken aback, replies, what else could I think about? As he speaks, the man reaches out and touches the other's back, frowning, looking at the Adam's apple. You do seem quite mature. But why is your body so thin? There's hardly any flesh on your waist. Did all your food go into growing taller? Fu Yunyi fiercely brushed away the man's hand and whispered coldly, no need for you to bother. Then, he strode out of the changing room. Zhou Guangfan watched the boy's retreating figure, puzzled and wondering why he was angry again. Mr. Zhou, suddenly, a female voice called him from outside the changing room. What a coincidence. Are you part of this play too? Turning around, Zhou Guangfan saw it was Li Yanbing, the rising star who played opposite Fu Yunyi. Zhou Guangfan shook her hand. He smiled and said, no, I'm the acting coach for this play. Since they had worked together before, they started chatting. As they were talking, Li Yan suddenly rushed over. Oh, my dear Mr. Zhou, Li Yan interrupted their conversation. Why are you still here chatting? Young Master Fu is already angry. Zhou Guangfan was confused. Angry about what? Li Yan dragged Zhou Guangfan away. Go see for yourself. Have you guessed why he's angry? Handsome brother and the rising star were happily chatting, while the younger wolf dog brother was inexplicably angry by himself. When Zhou Guangfan found Fu Yunyi, he saw him sitting sullenly without a word. What's got you down, Xiao Yi? Zhou Guangfan approached and asked him. You had a good chat with that actress, huh? Fu Yunyi suddenly spoke up, and Zhou Guangfan suddenly realized, you mean Li Yanbing? She's acting opposite you, and as your coach, I thought I'd talk to her to make discussing the scenes easier in the future. Fu Yunyi suddenly grabbed the man's collar. You're mine, why talk to her? If that's the case, then don't be my coach anymore. I disdain to share my possessions with others. Zhou Guangfan looked aggrieved. What do you mean, yours? I'm just your coach. Fu Yunyi's eyes suddenly sharpened. Zhou Guangfan, you're really despicable. You flirt with others even though you have a girlfriend. Zhou Guangfan frowned, always feeling that Fu Yunyi indeed had a skewed understanding of certain relationships. But then he thought maybe he hadn't educated him well enough. With a sense of guilt, he stepped forward, cupped the boy's face, and coaxed him. All right, big brother knows now. I won't talk to her carelessly anymore. Is that okay? Fu Yunyi was still cold-faced. Zhou Guangfan, remember this. If there's a next time, I won't let you off so easily. After saying that, he still seemed a bit unsatisfied and actually bit Zhou Guangfan's ear. Zhou Guangfan stood there blushing and in shock, wondering to himself what was wrong with this kid. Why would he bite someone? But at least the kid was pacified, and the first scene could finally start filming. Brother Shenyu, how long will you be away this time before you can return? Li Yanbing quickly got into character, her big eyes brimming with sorrow as she gazed at her lover. Zhou Guangfan sighed again. Indeed, she is the acting backbone of the popular young actresses in the entertainment industry. She does have some skills. Don't cry. Shenyu, played by Fu Yunyi, raised his hand to wipe away the tears at the corner of the girl's eyes and said in a low, gentle voice, Yuan, I'm going out to learn skills to serve the country. You should wish me well. Zhou Guangfan watched from the side, his heart suddenly skipped a beat. Fu Yunyi's expression handling was actually not very good, but he was very talented. This innate temperament couldn't be hidden and was so dazzling. Brother Shenyu, Yuan ran up and grabbed the boy's arm, wanting to kiss her lover's lips. But at this moment, Fu Yunyi's eyes suddenly turned cold, and he stepped back. Li Yanbing missed and stood there awkwardly. The director immediately called cut and then looked at Fu Yunyi gently. Yunyi, what's wrong? Are you feeling unwell? Fu Yunyi tugged at the collar of his green robe, his eyes indifferent. I can't kiss. Director Li's heart burned with anger, but he still kept a smile. How could you not kiss? It's just a light kiss. Fu Yunyi said softly with a blank expression. Anyway, I can't do it. After speaking, the boy turned and went into the break room. Director Li's temples throbbed with anger, but he couldn't lose his temper. Suddenly, he looked at Zhou Guangfan standing beside him. Teacher Zhou, could you help persuade him? You are now Fu Yunyi's teacher, he should listen to you to some extent. Zhou Guangfan sighed. I'll give it a try, but I don't know if I can persuade him. You'd better be prepared to find a stand-in. The first scene with the new popular young actress was a kissing scene, but when she kissed him, He avoided it and then locked himself in the break room. Director Lee had no choice but to ask the beautiful brother to persuade him. Bang, bang, bang. The door of the break room was knocked on. The room was silent, and no one answered. Zhou Guangfan thought for a while and reluctantly turned the doorknob and went in. Fu Yunyi was sitting on the sofa, looking indifferent and sullen. No one is forcing you. If you don't want to shoot, then don't. Zhou Guangfan walked over gently. Don't always hide and sulk alone, it's very damaging to your spleen and lungs. The boy frowned and said coldly, no one is forcing me, what are you doing here? Aren't you here to plead for Li Yian? Zhou Guangfan coughed guiltily, feeling the awkwardness of being caught. I'm not forcing you. Zhou Guangfan pulled up a chair and sat down beside the boy. I just want to ask you, why don't you want to act? Fu Yunyi remained silent. Zhou Guangfan stared at his profile. Xiao Yi, it's just acting. Besides, Li Yanbing is a very beautiful girl. Kissing her is not a loss for you. The girl didn't say anything, so what's with your reluctance? Fu Yunyi sneered, his voice somber. If you think she's beautiful, you kiss her. Then he started yelling again. If you despise me, then leave. What are you still doing here? Zhou Guangfan's heart tightened, and he frowned. Who despises you? Seeing the alienation and loneliness in the boy's eyes, Zhou Guangfan's heart trembled. Fu Yunyi has always been distant from others. Now, suddenly forcing him to kiss a strange girl, how could this not breach his defenses? Thinking this, Zhou Guangfan suddenly leaned in, tenderly stroking Fu Yunyi's hair. If you don't want to kiss, then don't. We won't shoot this scene, okay? However, Fu Yunyi suddenly exerted force, pushing Zhou Guangfan down on the sofa. Zhou Guangfan gasped, if you want to argue, then argue, why push me? Fu Yunyi snorted, who told you to pressure me just now? Zhou Guangfan sighed, I'll urge the director to find you a stand-in. If we can't find one temporarily, I'll stand in for you at worst. Who allowed you to stand in for me? Fu Yunyi's face suddenly changed, his eyes as cold as ice. With so many actors in the crew, can't we find a stand-in? Do you think just any cat or dog can be your stand-in? Zhou Guangfan frowned, with your physique, how can an ordinary person handle it? I've been acting for a few years, I have some experience, I can still replace you. No way. Fu Yunyi suddenly grabbed the man's wrist. You're my teacher, you're not allowed to act. It's not that I can't do it. It's just that I don't know how. How could I not know? Zhou Guangfan said confusedly. It's just a kiss. As their lips touched, shall I teach you? Fu Yunyi suddenly looked up, his eyes like a little wolf's, staring intently at the person before him. How do you teach? Yes, how do you teach? Like and follow to watch the next episode. Approaching, the wolf dog younger brother, not knowing how to kiss, can only flee when filming a kissing scene with a beautiful actress. After learning the reason, the best actor older brother says he will teach on the spot. This turned the wolf dog younger brother suddenly into a husky, nodding vigorously and saying okay, then striding over to pinch the man's chin. Zhou Guangfan was startled and stepped back, asking what the younger brother was trying to do. Fu Yunyi frowned and said with some impatience, what are you dodging for? Didn't you say you'd teach me? Zhou Guangfan coughed lightly and glanced at the boy's hand, muttering, teach I will, but why are you pinching my chin? It gives the illusion that I'm a delicate girl. Fu Yunyi rubbed his fingers, isn't that how it's supposed to be in the play? How can you kiss deeper without locking jaws? Zhou Guangfan explained with a slight embarrassment, in this scene, you don't need to kiss too deeply. After all, the characters are still young boys and girls. A light peck, like a dragonfly touching the water, is enough. Dragonfly touching the water? The boy frowned, not quite understanding. Zhou Guangfan nodded and suddenly stepped forward. Then, he did something that everyone disliked, so let's skip it here. This made Fu Yunyi's heart skip a beat, freezing him in place, his eyelids stretched wide, and his tender ear tips blushed. Seeing him silent, Zhou Guangfan touched his lips and said softly, did you understand? There's no need to feel awkward. Just touch Li Yanbing's lips like this when the time comes. Fu Yunyi hung his head, but I still don't want to kiss Li Yanbing. Zhou Guangfan felt a lump in his chest and asked him why. Are you blaming me? Fu Yunyi suddenly raised his head and said coldly, you say you'll teach me, but you dodge and won't let me touch your chin. If you're not sincere about teaching me, then don't pretend, okay? Zhou Guangfan was left speechless, and after a long while, he said, I didn't mean anything else. I dodged because you were too sudden, and I didn't react in time. Hearing this, Fu Yunyi pressed forward and asked, have you reacted now? Zhou Guangfan looked up at the still somewhat youthful and handsome face, and thought it was a bit funny. Why feel awkward? When Fu Yunyi was 7 or 8, I used to kiss him a lot. The young Fu Yunyi was much cuter than he is now, with his cold demeanor. Every time after school, I couldn't help but hug the kid and kiss him all over, teasing him like a little puppy. Having realized this, Zhou Quanfan lifted his eyes calmly and said softly, I didn't say I wouldn't teach you. What are you so worked up about? Fu Yunyi's breath tightened. Fine. You won't evade me, right? Zhou Quanfan replied calmly, I won't. Fu Yunyi slightly raised his eyebrows and pushed his luck. I want to pinch your chin. Zhou Quanfan was stunned. Before he could react, the boy forcefully grabbed his chin. He said fiercely, like and follow to watch the next episode. To teach the wolf dog younger brother how to act. The actor brother's lips even got injured. He suddenly pushed the boy away and frowned. Did I offend you? Why do you always go for the teeth? Fu Yunyi mischievously touched his lips and said, Can't help it, Mr. Zhou is as soft as jelly. Zhou Quanfan clenched his jaw and asked with a stern face, Have you learned this time? Fu Yunyi raised his eyebrows and said softly, If I say I haven't learned, would Mr. Zhou be willing to teach me again? Zhou Quanfan chuckled, If you haven't learned. Zhou Quanfan laughed and said, If you haven't learned it by now, you don't need to learn it anymore. The teacher will be your stand-in. I'll take your place in this scene. You dare, old man. Fu Yunyi suddenly grabbed the man's collar. Glaring at him fiercely, he said, Teacher Zhou, I really don't like it when something I've touched is touched by someone else. So, keep your mouth shut for me, otherwise, you'll regret it. After saying this, he walked out of the lounge and returned to the set. The filming finally resumed. This time, Fu Yunyi was very cooperative, and the first scene was completed smoothly. Very good, Director Li said excitedly. Young Master Fu, you acted well. Let me take you to rest for a bit. But Fu Yunyi, with a gloomy expression, pushed him away and walked off covering his mouth. Zhou Quanfan hurriedly followed. Fu Yunyi stayed in the bathroom for over 20 minutes. Zhou Quanfan finally couldn't wait any longer and barged in. He saw the boy with his head down, still brushing his teeth incessantly. He was brushing so hard that his lips were already slightly swollen. Zhou Quanfan's heart tightened. He quickly went over, grabbed the toothbrush from the boy's hand, and said coldly, Are you crazy? There's no need to torture yourself like this. Fu Yunyi turned to look at Zhou Quanfan and said, Leave me alone. Give me back the toothbrush. Zhou Quanfan moved his hand behind his back, hiding the toothbrush. Fu Yunyi pounced forward, intent on forcibly taking it. Zhou Quanfan gritted his teeth and said, Do you mind that kiss so much? Fu Yunyi's expression turned slightly cold. I just have a bit of a cleanliness obsession. Is that also wrong? Zhou Quanfan felt a tightness in his chest and moved closer with concern. I know you have a cleanliness obsession and might not mentally accept kissing someone else. But even if you can't accept it, you should still take care of your own body, right? Saying this, Zhou Quanfan raised his hand and gently touched the corner of the boy's mouth. It must be swollen and painful, right? It hurts. Fu Yunyi's eyes flickered. Zhou Quanfan sighed with pity, pulled the boy to his side, and carefully examined the wounds on his mouth. Softly, he said, Let me apply some medicine for you. Unaware of the impropriety, Zhou Quanfan moved close, their breaths intertwining. Overwhelmed, Fu Yunyi felt a heat in his chest and hastily stepped back, exclaiming, No need. Then, suddenly pushing the other away with a grim expression, he said, Give me the toothbrush and get out. Saying this, the boy began to grab for it again. Seeing that the toothbrush was about to be taken away, Zhou Quanfan's eyes flashed, and he quickly put the toothbrush into his own mouth and took a taste. All right, I'll give it back to you. Since it has my saliva on it anyway, you can continue to use it if you want. Guess how Fu Yunyi will react. This little brother has severe OCD. He just shot a kissing scene. Then he hid in the bathroom and brushed his teeth for half an hour. To stop his self-destructive behavior, the older brother grabbed his toothbrush and put it in his own mouth. He didn't believe this finicky kid would still use it. But to his surprise, Fu Yunyi took the toothbrush, glanced at the man, and snorted coldly, Old man, you're so childish. After saying that, he naturally put the toothbrush in his mouth and continued brushing. Zhou Quanfan was dumbfounded and said, Aren't you a germaphobe? Fu Yunyi seemed finally satisfied with his brushing, took a towel, wiped the corner of his lips, and then turned to look at the stiff man beside him. Yeah, I have OCD. Zhou Quanfan pointed at the toothbrush in confusion. Then why are you still using? Fu Yunyi interrupted him with a light laugh and leaned closer. What's there to be afraid of? Didn't I just eat yours at lunch? After saying that, the boy naturally bypassed him and walked out of the bathroom, leaving Zhou Quanfan alone, feeling bewildered and chaotic. At 10 p.m., Zhou Quanfan went to the balcony to make a phone call. Little Liu Liu. Bao Jing hasn't returned home for more than a week. He wants to know how Chao Xiaonan, who is staying at Aunt Wang's place, is doing. Chao Xiaonan sounds so well behaved over the phone that it's heart-wrenching. This is his first time being away from him for so long, but the child's chattering warms his heart amidst the recent flurry of events. Faced with the greatly changed Fu Yunyi, he still feels somewhat weary. Zhou Quanfan can tell that Fu Yunyi clearly still harbors some resentment towards him for abandoning him back then. So, he wants to seek revenge, but Zhou Quanfan does not know how or when he plans to retaliate. Constantly on edge, he naturally feels exhausted. After hanging up the phone, Zhou Quanfan returns to the room and finds Fu Yunyi still flipping through a thick book on the sofa. He habitually reminds him, "Xiaoyi, it's 10:30. You should go to sleep. Staying up late is bad for you." Fu Yunyi doesn't look up and replies impatiently, "If you want to sleep, then sleep. I don't want to." In the midst of speaking, Zhou Quanfan suddenly notices the boy's ears and the tender neck turning red. This isn't right. Alarm bells go off in Zhou Quanfan's mind. He quickly reaches out to touch the boy's forehead. "Are you feverish? Why is your face so red?" Fu Yunyi's expression changes. He pushes the man's hand away impatiently. "I'm not." Zhou Quanfan snatches the book from the boy's hand. "Stop reading. Let's go. I'll take you to the hospital. You might really have a fever." Fu Yunyi suddenly sat up, trying to snatch the book. "I'm not feverish, stop fussing over me." During the struggle, with a snap, the book fell to the ground following a semicircular trajectory. The book opened, revealing an illustration of a young girl wearing a gauzy dress, shyly exposing her green and beautifully curved figure. The air was silent for 2 or 3 seconds. With a bang, Fu Yunyi lay back down and covered himself tightly with the blanket, squeezing out a word through clenched teeth in anger: "Scram." How will Zhou Quanfan deal with his younger brother's sudden bashfulness? Hit like and follow to watch the next episode. This younger brother simply looked at a book and became red-faced and embarrassed after his older brother saw the racy illustrations inside. In a second, the younger brother turned into a bashful little sheep and hid under the quilt. Zhou Quanfan picked up the book from the ground and saw. It was the original novel of the drama that Fu Yunyi had acted in. The book was quite bold, with many images that could make young people blush and feel restless. Zhou Quanfan cleared his throat, breaking the silence. "Little Yi, it's really okay. You've grown up now. You can read this kind of book. And, it's normal to have reactions, there's no need to be shy if you feel." "Scram." A forceful growl filled with deep breath interrupted Zhou Quanfan's words. Zhou Quanfan swallowed hard, resignedly closed his mouth, walked to the bed, turned off the light, folded the blankets, and went to sleep. In the middle of the night, Zhou Quanfan vaguely felt very hot and was in a daze. Suddenly, he felt a tightness around his waist. In the darkness, a scorching hot hand slipped under his clothes to his waistline. Zhou Quanfan shivered and tried to break free. Behind him came Fu Yunyi's voice, "Don't move." Zhou Quanfan stiffened and said, "You, what are you doing?" "Nothing, brother," the boy whispered in his ear. Zhou Quanfan was furious. "If you're doing nothing, why are you in my bed?" Fu Yunyi lowered his face and said softly, "I'm feeling restless, brother. When I lie down, the content of this book keeps flashing in my mind. I can't sleep because I'm so restless. To prevent you from being as restless as Fu Yunyi and unable to sleep, I'll skip this part of the plot." Half an hour later, Zhou Quanfan was washing his hands in the bathroom. Zhou Quanfan was washing his hands in the bathroom, annoyed at himself for what he had done, wondering why he was behaving as if he was under his spell. After washing up and returning to the bedroom, he found the pillow on his bed missing. Fu Yunyi's voice came from the other bed, "Your bed is all wrinkled. Sleep with me tonight. We'll have someone clean up tomorrow." Zhou Quanfan quickly pulled off the sheets and ran back to the bathroom. "Don't call anyone. I'll wash it myself. You go to sleep first." When the man came out again, the bedroom was quiet. Fu Yunyi was lying under the blanket. He tiptoed to the bed, carefully lifting the blanket covering the boy's face. Fu Yunyi was already asleep, his long, thick eyelashes casting shadows, and his face looked pale and translucent under the light. "Much prettier like this," Zhou Quanfan murmured uncontrollably, "cuter than when awake." This defenseless appearance reminded Zhou Quanfan of himself as a child. He smiled, touched the boy's straight nose, and whispered, "Wouldn't it be nice to sleep quietly like this? Why make trouble?" After sighing softly, he turned off the lamp on the bedside table, said good night, and lay down to sleep. The moment he lay down, Fu Yunyi opened his eyes. In the darkness, his bright eyes twinkled. The boy chuckled to himself, "Silly old man. Who dares to let the young master of the Super Film Corporation shoot until he gets heatstroke? Certainly not his obedient director. Or his infinitely caring acting coach and movie star brother. It mustn't be them." Because the scene scheduled for shooting that morning was simple, Zhou Quanfan didn't go to the set but stayed in the hotel to deal with some school matters. But around noon, Director Li's assistant, Xiao Wang, suddenly called. He spoke urgently, telling him to come quickly, saying that young Master Fu was about to faint from heatstroke during filming. Without time to ask for details, Zhou Quanfan raced to the set. The moment he stepped into the filming area, assistant Xiao Wang came up to meet him. "How is it going?" Zhou Quanfan asked anxiously, grabbing his arm. "Where's Fu Yunyi? Has he been taken to the hospital?" Xiao Wang frowned with difficulty. "He hasn't been taken to the hospital. He's still filming." "What?" Zhou Quanfan was furious. "It's noon, why are they still filming? Didn't he get heatstroke?" "Teacher Zhou, please listen to me," Xiao Wang hurriedly said. "The scene was supposed to be finished by 10, but then young Master Fu's father suddenly came. He wanted to watch him act, and director Li didn't dare to stop filming, so they kept going. Young Master Fu could only continue to cooperate. What kind of inspection is this? Picking such a time in the hot weather to watch him act, it's like he's watching him suffer." Zhou Quanfan felt a surge of anger and strode towards the filming area with long steps. But just as he entered the shooting zone, Xiao Wang quickly followed and tugged at his sleeve. "Please don't be impulsive. They are filming right now. If the filming is interrupted, young Master Fu will still have to reshoot." Zhou Quanfan stood frozen, clearly seeing the boy's completely pallid face. His head was lowered, and his eyes and brow were calm, but his shoulders had begun to sway and tremble. And under a large parasol nearby, was Fu Wanlin, the so-called #1 film and television tycoon of the capital, sitting leisurely in a chair with sunglasses on, surrounded by many people fanning and offering him water. The scene being filmed was supposed to be shot in the afternoon. It's about Shen Yu, played by Fu Yunyi, insisting on joining the revolution. Shen's father disagrees, leading to an argument. Shen Yu kneels down, begging his father to let him go. During the filming, when Shen's father, in a fit of anger, strikes the boy's shoulder with a walking stick. Although he holds back, the stick still clearly hits the boy's back. Fu Yunyi shivers slightly, slanting his body and collapsing. Cut! Li Yin yelled, "Well done, this scene is great! It's a wrap." As soon as the words fell, Zhou Quanfan rushed over and helped the person on the ground up. Xiao Yi. Zhou Quanfan shakes his shoulder, trying to wake him up. Fu Yunyi was already exhausted from the heat, his complexion pale as paper, his forehead covered in sweat. Zhou Quanfan said with concern, "Stay alert, I'll take you to the rest room. There's air conditioning there. Let's go rest." Fu Yunyi struggled to stand up and suddenly shook off the man's hand, whispering, "Why are you here? Leave quickly." Zhou Quanfan's heart skipped a beat. "Why should I leave? You're about to faint." While he was speaking, suddenly, a deep voice came from behind. "So this is the new assistant you hired. You disobeyed my orders for him, dismissed the person I arranged for you, insisting on having Beauty Brother as the assistant." The wolf dog brother dismissed the fierce wolf father's man. Facing his father's dissatisfaction, Fu Yunyi's expression stiffened. He quickly pulled Zhou Quanfan behind him and forced himself to answer, "He's my person. I already have many people from my family following me. I want to train myself." Fu Wanlin's expression slightly relaxed as he hummed and said, "It's good that you have the idea to exercise. After all, your elder and second brothers have their own businesses. You can't continue to be a useless freeloader." Upon hearing this, Zhou Quanfan had only one thought: is Dad poisoned or what? Who talks about their son like this? Yet the boy bowed his head and bit his jaw tightly, saying, "Dad, I'm sorry for being incompetent and causing you worry." Fu Wanlin snorted and said, "As long as you're aware of it, that's fine. I've invested a lot of money in this play. If it weren't for me, you wouldn't have the chance to play the lead role. If you mess it up, don't go around saying you're my son. I can't afford to lose that face." After saying that, he didn't look back, turned around, and walked away with his hands behind his back. Fu Yunyi's eyelashes trembled as he stared coldly at the man's departing figure, murmuring, "Even if I perform well, what does it matter? Whether I'm successful or not, you'll never announce to the outside world that I'm your son." Zhou Quanfan's heart trembled as he called out with heartache, "Xiao Yi." As the father walked away, Fu Yunyi, who had been bracing himself, finally collapsed. His vision went dark, and with a thud, he fell into Zhou Quanfan's arms. Zhou Quanfan anxiously supported the boy and carried him into the resting vehicle. He quickly pulled off the boy's sweat-soaked shirt to let him breathe and cool down. Fu Yunyi was dazed, his mind as muddled as paste, and suddenly, as if in a dream, he softly called out, "Brother." Zhou Quanfan paused in his actions, feeling a pang in his heart. Fu Yunyi spoke a bit frantically, "Brother, is that you? Have you come to take me home?" Zhou Quanfan snapped back to reality and held the boy's hand, saying, "It's me, I'm here." The boy's eyes flickered, and suddenly he sat up straight, flinging himself into the other's embrace. don't abandon me, he muffled into the man's shoulder, his voice hoarse. They were all bullying me. Zhou Quangfan's expression became solemn, as a wave of sourness surged up in his heart. How could he not feel distressed? This is the younger brother who affectionately called him brother for 7 years. Seeing him in distress now, he couldn't imagine what kind of life Fu Yunyi had been living during the 6 or 7 years they were apart. Even their only father who could protect him didn't look out for him. Even his own father, the only one who could protect him, doesn't like him, let alone anyone else. Zhou Quangfan sighed, tightened his arms, and patted the boy's back like he did when he was young, comforting him. Xiao Yi, be good. Brother is here, no one dares to bully you. Feng Yunyi's shoulders relaxed, as if all his defenses had been lowered. He rested his head on the man's shoulder with peace of mind and closed his eyes to sleep. The summer heat-stricken younger brother murmured nonsense, complaining and asking for hugs. The beautiful older brother couldn't help but feel the illusion that his good little brother had returned to him. But when Feng Yunyi woke up, everything had completely changed. Seeing his brother wake up, Zhou Quangfan sat by the bed to take his temperature. Maybe just waking up, his consciousness hadn't fully returned. Feng Yunyi cooperatively opened his mouth and then leaned back against the headboard with the thermometer in his mouth, eyes listless and face pale. Zhou Quangfan felt a pang of heartache, and couldn't help but raise his hand to ruffle the boy's hair. It's okay, I'll always take care of you, brother is here. What are you doing? The boy suddenly raised his eyes, a hint of coldness showing in his gaze. Zhou Quangfan was so frightened that he withdrew his hand and said, what's wrong? Zhou Quangfan, the boy said coldly with narrowed eyes. Did I say any nonsense in the car? No. Zhou Quangfan's eyes shifted, straightening his shoulders and speaking seriously. You fainted and have been asleep since then, sleeping very deeply. Feng Yunyi let out a small sigh of relief, took the thermometer out of his mouth, and said sternly, let me tell you, when I'm confused, I might say some nonsense, but it's all just nonsense. Pretend you didn't hear it, don't take it seriously. Zhou Quangfan took the thermometer from the other person's hand. Seeing the temperature had dropped to 36 degrees, he finally felt relieved and nodded casually, saying, I know, don't worry. Then, Fu Yunyi raised his voice, his eyes flashing with cold light. I'm not a poor thing, I don't need your pity. Zhou Quangfan felt a pang in his heart and silently sighed. I'm not pitying you. With your identity and status, it's not my place to pity you. I just feel sorry for you. Zhou Quangfan then left the room, letting the boy rest alone. But the boy got up and turned on the computer, skillfully moving the mouse and quickly browsing through the massive data on the screen. In fact, Fu Wanlin didn't want his illegitimate son to be involved in the operations of the Fu business empire. He didn't even allow him to study business, thinking his 2 other sons were enough. But Fu Yunyi had his own plans. He wanted those who once looked down on him, tormented him, attempted to humiliate and control him, to all become jokes. Not only did he study business in secret, but he also obtained confidential information from his second brother's company through special channels. Bringing down his second brother was the first step in his revenge plan. Just as he began to weave his revenge plan, the bedroom door was suddenly pushed open. Who would discover his little secret? Like and follow to see the next episode. Today, this younger brother is a wolf of revenge, studying the business data of the second brother's company, plotting to bring him down. At this moment, the beautiful elder brother suddenly pushed the door open, heartachingly scolding the younger brother for not resting well. But he himself has actually been so tired these past few days that he's developed a stomach illness. The boy's eyes darkened. After quickly shutting down the computer, he walked towards the dining room. At the dinner table, Zhou Quangfan was especially attentive today, proactively picking up a spare rib with his chopsticks and putting it into the boy's bowl. You used to love this when you were little. Fu Yunyi, however, picked the spare rib back into the man's plate, saying coldly, pick out the peppercorns for me. Zhou Quangfan gritted his teeth and carefully picked out the peppercorns before passing it back. Fu Yunyi gave a glance and again shoved the spare rib out. The bones, take the bones out. Zhou Quangfan suddenly slammed his chopsticks down on the table, frowning without saying a word. Fu Yunyi looked up and snorted coldly, can't keep up the act? Zhou Quangfan indeed had something to ask for at this moment, so he pursed his lips and said directly, Director Li said to give you a few days off, so I wanted to ask for some leave. Fu Yunyi slammed the table fiercely, I don't allow it. You are my assistant now. You have to revolve around me. Zhou Quangfan protested, I need to rest. I can rest. Fu Yunyi pointed in the direction of the bedroom. If you're tired, go lie in bed and sleep all day tomorrow. Fu Yunyi. Zhou Quangfan was so angry that veins popped on his forehead, and the surge of anger and blood made his stomach pain suddenly worsen. He bent down in pain, and Fu Yunyi's eyes flickered fiercely. What's wrong with you? Zhou Quangfan clutched his stomach, his voice trembling, Shaoi, I. I might have a bit of a stomachache. It must have been these past few days, following you around on set, living in the rough. Hey! Joe Quang-fan exclaimed, still reeling when the boy suddenly picked him up around the waist. What are you doing? Joe Quang-fan looked bewildered at the face so close to his. Stop talking, Fu Yunyi growled, carried him straight to the bedroom, put him down on the bed, and then turned around anxiously. You lie down. I'll call the doctor right away. Joe Quang-fan quickly grabbed the boy. No. No need to trouble yourself like that. I just haven't been eating well recently. Once I adjust my diet, I should be. Shut up. An intense gaze swept over him. Fu Yunyi suddenly became so fierce that Joe Quang-fan couldn't comprehend. He didn't understand why the boy was reacting so strongly. I'll be fine with some medicine, why are you? But his words were cut off by a low growl. Fu Yunyi, like a wounded animal, let out a pained cry in the room. Have you forgotten how our mother died? This boy, who could no longer endure abuse, ran away from his wealthy but turbulent family. He was taken in by a kind mother and son, and for the first time in 7 years, he truly experienced pure love and the warmth of a home. However, he was eventually found by his family and sent abroad to study. Before he returned to his country, he learned that the mother who had raised him for 7 years had passed away from gastric cancer a few years before. And now, seeing my brother, who raised me for 7 years, suffering from stomach pain in front of me, Fu Yunyi angrily yelled at him, have you forgotten how our mom died? The air froze for 2 or 3 seconds. Joe Quang-fan guiltily asked him how he knew, as Fu Yunyi stood there with eyes red. He remembered the woman who was kinder to him than his own mother. He also remembered her smiling and saying she was fine even when she had stomach pains. The memory made Fu Yunyi's hands tremble as he slumped beside the desk. Joe Quang-fan, after all these years, it's one thing never to contact me, but to even keep the death of mom from me is another. Joe Quang-fan stared stiffly at his back. He could tolerate Fu Yunyi making a fuss, but he couldn't stand to see him so despondent, like an abandoned child. Fu Yunyi let out a long breath, his voice quivering. I know you don't care because it seems to be a tradition in your family. Not caring about anything, saying everything is fine. Mom. Every time she had stomach pains, she would say the same. Mom. Every time she had a stomachache, she would say this. But in the end, she died. She died from the stomachache. The boy's expression turns to sorrow as he continues. It's like she never considered how scared a child in the world would be of her leaving. Xiao Yi. Joe Quang-fan got up from the bed, wanting to hug him. But as soon as he touched the boy's shoulder, he was pushed away. I'm going to call the doctor, you're not allowed to move, Fu Yunyi said in a lowered voice, coldly. Then, he turned and walked towards the phone. The doctor arrived quickly, examined Joe Quang-fan, and said his gastric ulcer was quite serious and that he shouldn't overwork himself. Joe Quang-fan obediently nodded his head. Then, turning back, he asked the doctor not to tell Fu Yunyi about his condition. He didn't want him to worry. The doctor reluctantly agreed, instructed Joe Quang-fan to take his medication on time, and then left the room. Fu Yunyi seemed still to be angry, lying alone on the sofa in the living room. Joe Quang-fan's heart softened. He knelt beside the boy, reached out to touch his shoulder, and said softly, I know you're not asleep. It's cold on the sofa, come back to the bedroom to sleep. Fu Yunyi didn't speak, only raised his hand to push the man's arm away. Joe Quang-fan sighed, touched his shoulder again, be good. Don't sleep here, come back to bed, okay? Go away, the boy growled softly. He turned over, sat up with his back to Joe Quang-fan. Don't be angry anymore. The doctor said it's just a minor issue, it's nothing serious. The medicine has already been prescribed. Joe Quang-fan helplessly patted the boy's shoulder. From now on, if the doctor tells me to take medicine, I will. If I'm told to get an injection, I will. Is that okay? What did the doctor say? Fu Yunyi's tone was filled with anxiety. It's not related to my mother's illness, right? Joe Quang-fan's heart tightened as he belatedly realized why Fu Yunyi had such a strong reaction. He thought. He had gotten the same disease as his mother. Idiot, the warmth in the man's chest. Mom's illness is not contagious. Neither I nor you have it, and nobody will. The boy's expression did not change, but his tense shoulders visibly relaxed. His cool eyes asked, who did you just call an idiot? Joe Quang-fan stiffened and quickly stood up. Without looking back, he headed out, saying, I'm going to take a shower. You should go back to sleep. This younger brother with a wolf dog's controlling nature has his movie star older brother as his acting teacher, teaching him how to act. Yet he doesn't even allow for a single day off, leaving his brother suddenly suffering from stomach gas. The next morning, Joe Quang-fan again wanted to ask Fu Yunyi for leave, only to find that he had disappeared without a trace. After asking a cleaning lady, he learned that Fu Yunyi had been called out by Fu Wanlin. Zhou Quanfan then wondered, why didn't anyone call me to get up this morning? Did the young master dress and wash up by himself? The lady seriously replied, the young master said you were sick today and not to disturb you. Then he dressed and washed up by himself. A warm current surged in Zhou Quanfan's heart, thinking that no matter how badly Fu Yunyi behaves on the surface, deep down he still cares about his brother. The young master also instructed. The cleaning lady continued, he said you are the most dishonest person, and told us to watch you closely so you rest well and get better soon, so that you can serve him sooner. The smile on the man's lips froze, and the warm current that had just risen in his heart completely chilled. Okay, it was wishful thinking again. He wanted him to get better only to serve him sooner. This kid is still an ungrateful wolf after all. But the leave still had to be requested, so Zhou Quanfan went ahead and called Fu Yunyi. Thinking about what happened on set yesterday, Zhou Quanfan has no good feelings towards Fu Wanlin. He advised Fu Yunyi not to compromise himself, saying there's no need to cling to anyone. Fu Yunyi was silent for a while before simply replying, Zhou Quanfan, we are not the same. Of course, they are different. He is Fu Yunyi, destined to ride the waves on the clouds. Whether it's clinging or enduring, he cannot give up the power Fu Wanlin holds. But Zhou Quanfan can freely throw away his title as an emperor of film and retire early, to become a teacher in a down-to-earth manner. He can accept being ordinary and even enjoy it. Zhou Quanfan was silent for a moment, he seemed to understand Fu Yunyi's heart. So, what did you want to talk to me about? Fu Yunyi lowered his voice. Fu Wanlin will be here soon. Zhou Quanfan then came back to his senses, I have to go out today. I might not be back until the evening. No. The boy's voice was firm. I already refused you last night. You're sick and need to rest in the hotel. Zhou Quanfan's eyes lit up, that's the thing, because I'm sick, I want to go to the hospital for a thorough checkup. Fu Yunyi was silent for a while before finally saying, get a full body checkup. When I get back, give me the report. After hanging up the phone, Zhou Quanfan breathed a sigh of relief. He turned around and immediately started packing his things. In fact, he wanted to go home to see Chao Xiaonan. After all, the two had never been apart for so long. He was worried he might not be adapting well at his aunt's house. Ding dong, the doorbell rang. As soon as the door opened, Chao Xiaonan shouted Daddy, and jumped into the man's arms. Looking down at the boy's little suit and bow tie, Zhou Quanfan teased him, Yo, little Nan, dressed so smartly, where are you off to? His aunt chimed in from the side, you've come at just the right time. Today, little Nan's kindergarten is closed because one of his friends is having a birthday party. They've invited the whole class of kids to go sing at the KTV. As they were speaking, little Pumpkin came over, looking adorably clingy, asking his dad to accompany him. Zhou Quanfan thought that Fu Yunyi wouldn't be returning so soon, so he agreed to go. Unless something unexpected happens, what could possibly go wrong at a KTV? Stay tuned for the next episode, and don't forget to like, follow, and comment. The handsome brother, once an award-winning actor, when he attended his adopted son's kindergarten KTV birthday party, the female teachers were beside themselves with excitement. Happy and having drunk a few too many glasses, one collapsed next to him, while the wolf dog younger brother had already returned to the hotel. Today, he took advantage of a business negotiation by Fu Wanlin to set a trap for the Fu family's eldest son. Fu Yunyi, leaning on the balcony railing, looked out at the bustling traffic and neon lights below, pondering his future path. He suddenly felt very lonely and naturally thought of that person. He shouted loudly, Zhou Quanfan, but there was no answer. The cleaning lady came over and said, Mr. Zhou mentioned this morning that he was going to the hospital for a checkup and he hasn't returned yet. Fu Yunyi frowned, he hasn't returned yet? Did he say which hospital he was going to? The cleaning lady thought for a moment and said, Mr. Zhou seemed to have mentioned taking a bus to the city center. There's only one hospital in the city center, he must have gone there. I see, the boy replied, lifting his head, you may go now. The cleaning lady acknowledged and turned to leave. Wait a minute, Fu Yunyi called out to her again. Go to the kitchen and prepare some food. He should have something to eat when he returns. He has a poor stomach, so remember to always have stomach-warming food ready in the kitchen. Don't let him go hungry. After finishing, Fu Yunyi left the house. He needed to make a trip to the city center. He wanted to personally inquire about the health condition of Dr. Zhou Quanfan. He had to personally ask about Dr. Zhou Quanfan's health condition. Of course, this wasn't out of concern for him. It was for his own sake. Zhou Quanfan is now his teacher, his assistant, his servant, his punching bag. He's still very useful to him. He can't fall, nor can he get sick. He must be healthy for him to bully and exploit. That idiot Zhou Quanfan feels guilty towards him. As long as there's guilt, He won't betray him. Not betraying is enough. There aren't many people he can trust now. He needs to make good use of him. At the hospital reception, Fu Yunyi just had to feign pity briefly, and the reception nurse abandoned her principles. She patiently helped him check the systems list, but Zhou Quangfan's name wasn't in the search results. Fu Yunyi started to suspect that Zhou Quangfan didn't come for the checkup. After saying, thanks, he turned and left the hospital. So where had he been all day? Fu Yunyi sat in the car, confused and clueless. Full of rage with nowhere to vent, suddenly he spotted a familiar figure. Stop the car. Fu Yunyi suddenly roared at the driver. At that moment, through the car window, he clearly saw Zhou Quangfan coming out of a KTV. He held a woman in his arms, limp and flushed, and scoffed as he looked at the two people outside the car window. Fu Yunyi thought he had Zhou Quangfan under his complete control. But in the end, he was thoroughly deceived. Medical checkups, doctor's visits, leave of absence for stomachaches, it turns out it was all a lie. He just wanted to go out and pick up girls. Women. The boy's cool eyes darkened with shadows. He still couldn't stay away from women. Fu Yunyi's gaze turned cold as he watched the two people stuck together in the distance, instructing the driver to leave. This man lied about going for a health checkup when he was actually attending a kindergarten event for his foster son. But just as he was sending the drunken kindergarten teacher to wait for a ride by the roadside, he happened to be seen by his younger brother, who was passing by. Suspecting that he hadn't gone for the checkup, the brother left quietly, seething with anger. After sending the teacher away and then taking his son back to his aunt's house, Zhou Quangfan finally returned to the hotel. Before returning, he made a point of bringing over the medical report from last year. In the spacious living room, there was only Fu Yunyi. The boy sat on the sofa with a script in his hand. Zhou Quangfan let out a breath, relaxed his facial expression, and asked softly as he walked over, still reading the script? How did it go with your father today? Fu Yunyi didn't answer, simply asked without looking up, have you had a medical checkup? Oh, you've had it. Zhou Quangfan deliberately raised the medical report in his hand and said, no issues, I'm quite healthy. Fu Yunyi responded with a hum, raised his hand and said, let me see the report. Zhou Quangfan was startled. He didn't expect Fu Yunyi to be so meticulous. After discreetly putting away the report, he said, I'm 26, I can understand the report myself, no need. Before the man could finish, Fu Yunyi interrupted him. The man tried to brush it off again. But the boy only said 4 words, medical report. Net card. Zhou Quangfan finally gave up, threw the few sheets of paper in his hand onto the coffee table and said, fine, the medical report is from last year. I didn't go to the hospital today. Fu Yunyi sneered, can't keep up the act anymore? Zhou Quangfan lowered his eyes and said, I never intended to. It's you who wouldn't let me take leave. I really had something urgent. Fu Yunyi's anger grew, he loosened his tie and frowned. Teacher Zhou, what urgent matter do you have to take leave for? Your urgent matter is to find a woman, right? Fu Yunyi turned his head, his eyes as icy as frost, locked onto the person in front of him. You went to be with, right? Zhou Quangfan stood there dumbfounded, his pupils constricting. What are you talking about? Fu Yunyi's voice grew louder. Mr. Zhou, you couldn't even endure half a month of loneliness, so you secretly went to with someone, didn't you? Zhou Quangfan stared at the boy in disbelief, unable to believe these words came from Fu Yunyi's mouth. Xiao Yi, how could you think of me like that? I'm not, get lost. Fu Yunyi shouted. I don't have a brother as cheap as you. Saying this, he pushed Zhou Quangfan onto the sofa again. Stop pretending. Do you really think you're so pure and innocent? Zhou Quangfan didn't get up, sitting on the sofa protesting. Xiao Yi, you can't just accuse me without knowing the truth. Hey slander. Fu Yunyi walked up to the sofa. I saw you hugging a woman on the street. That woman was melting in your arms, blushing like crazy. Anyone could tell what you two were up to. Fu Yunyi's eyes were cold as he grabbed Zhou Quangfan's clothes. What else do you have to say? Zhou Quangfan fell silent. Could he even explain himself? What kind of punishment would await him? Like, comment, and watch the next episode. The wolfdog little brother misunderstands the beautiful older brother for going to a KTV with a woman. The older brother is speechless, unsure of how to explain. Fu Yunyi raised his little face and shouted. I saw you hugging a woman on the street. That woman was melting in your arms, blushing like crazy. Anyone could tell what you two were up to. No, that person is. Zhou Quangfan stopped mid-sentence. He didn't want Fu Yunyi to know about having a son yet. Xiao Nan's background involves many people and events from the past. He doesn't want to bring it up in front of Fu Yunyi, so he lies, saying, she was just a drunk woman. I saw her in distress and kindly helped her, that's all. And then? You ended up going to a hotel while helping her, right? Fu Yanyi's eyes were cold. You're already tainted. How can I make you believe me? The man sat on the sofa, staring at the person beside him and asked. However, Fu Yanyi sneered. Can't you understand? You're already dirty in my heart. I don't believe you anymore. Zhou Quanfan murmured with downcast eyes, Xiao Yi, calm down. Trust your brother, will you? Or, what do I need to do for you to believe me? Fu Yanyi sneered at this moment, stepped forward, and said in a low voice, now, directly, prove it to me with your appearance. Fu Yanyi, Zhou Quanfan really didn't know how to react now. His helpless resistance was so feeble. Don't, but before he could speak, Fu Yanyi's hand swiftly pulled open his clothes. Zhou Quanfan sat helplessly on the sofa, only uttering one word, you, only to be interrupted by Fu Yanyi, you what? When I see you getting intimate with others, I feel unbearably disgusted. Saying so, Fu Yanyi continued to move forward. If you don't prove your innocence, then get out, Fu Yanyi said, staring intently at the man's abs, as if trying to discern something from them, his eyes dark and brooding. See for yourself. If you've been with someone, the body always retains some traces, like bite marks, scratch marks, and so on. Zhou Quanfan took the opportunity of Fu Yanyi's pause to pull his clothes back on. There's nothing on my body, the boy said with downcast eyes. I can't see it anyway. Whether or not you've done that sort of thing, you know in your own heart. Saying so, the boy's eyes cast downward, his voice hoarsely whispered. His voice was hoarse beyond recognition. Who knows if there are any marks down there? Zhou Quanfan was shocked and clutched the man's hand tightly. Xiao Yi, don't. Fu Yanyi stood in front of the man with a pale face. Don't. So you admit you went out and slept with someone else? You admit you're a slut, right? Zhou Quanfan felt as if he had taken a massive blow. This immense sense of loss, triggered by the contempt from his younger brother who had always looked up to him, is something that someone who has never experienced it cannot understand. His emotions began to spiral out of control, his voice trembling. Xiao Yi, please. Fu Yanyi, however, became more convinced of his suspicions. You're begging because you're afraid of being found out, right? Who knows if there are any marks down there? Saying this, he stepped forward to tear off his clothes. When he suddenly pulled off Zhou Quanfan's belt, a tear dropped. The boy suddenly came to his senses. It was the first time he had seen his brother cry so helplessly. He stood there in disbelief. The younger brother forcibly attempted to check the older brother's body. The older brother, unable to resist, actually cried. Seeing his brother's tears, the younger brother also snapped out of his frenzied state. After all, in all these years, he had never seen this strong man cry. Zhou Quanfan, with tears in his eyes, pitifully explained again that he just kindly helped the girl and then left. Fu Yanyi's tense face slightly relaxed. He believed Zhou Quanfan. If this person had really done such a thing, he wouldn't be afraid to admit it. Besides, he had no reason to hide it from him. But even if he believed him, he couldn't let go of his anger. Why are you so kind? Fu Yanyi glared at the man coldly and said, what does it have to do with you if the girl's sister got drunk? Do you know her? Why were you so eager to help her? Forget it. I won't argue with you this time. Fu Yanyi's anger dissipated a lot. But as he said this, he suddenly realized something, his expression changed, and he shouted abruptly, no, there's nothing in the kitchen. Don't go in. But it was already too late. Zhou Quanfan had already stepped into the kitchen. The ground was a mess with broken plates and bowls everywhere, and the food was still steaming hot, obviously just made. Zhou Quanfan turned around in shock to look at the person sitting on the sofa with a cold face. Xiao Yi, was all this food made for me? Serves you right. Fu Yanyi stood up from the sofa, walked into the bedroom with a cold face. Who told you to look? You didn't come back, so you deserve to have no food. Stay hungry. Who told you to lie to me, you old lecher? You deserve to be hungry. In the end, Zhou Quanfan still got to eat. He found a portion of sweet and sour pork with rice in the microwave, which Fu Yanyi must have missed, thus escaping destruction. After eating and washing up, Zhou Quanfan changed into his pajamas and went to the bedroom. Fu Yanyi hasn't slept yet, still leaning against the bed reading a book. Stop reading. Zhou Quanfan approached the boy's bed and whispered, it's already 11. Go to sleep. Another half hour. The boy lifted his head and said with squinted eyes, I'll sleep after another half hour. Zhou Quanfan stared into his eyes, feeling a sudden tightness in his heart, and hurriedly said, what's wrong with your eyes? Are you nearsighted? Let's go for an eye exam another day and get you a pair of glasses. Fu Yanyi leaned back lazily in the chair, saying indifferently, I don't want to. Glasses are ugly. What's ugly about them? Zhou Quanfan frowned. I wear them when I teach at school. Fu Yanyi suddenly perked up, sat upright, and said, Teacher Zhou, Put on your glasses and let me see. Maybe if they look good, I'll be willing to wear them. Zhou Guangfan had no choice but to take out his gold-rimmed glasses, frowning as he stepped to the bed. What's there to see? Wearing them, Fu Yunyi's playful smile slowly solidified on his face. The loose bathrobe, slightly damp hair, cold gleaming gold-rimmed glasses, and those careless yet subtly flirtatious eyes. This look is truly annoying. Despite having a face that screams abstinence, he always seduces others unconsciously. Not wearing them at other times is just to tempt those young students, right? Take them off. The boy suddenly roared with a sinister look in his eyes. Zhou Guangfan got startled, quickly took off the glasses and said, "Fine, I'll take them off." "Why are you shouting so loudly, as if I..." "Hey!" Fu Yunyi suddenly stood up from the bed and snatched the glasses from the man's hand. Then, grabbing the man's wrist, he pinned him down. "What are you doing?" Zhou Guangfan looked in astonishment at the person only inches away from his face. "I won't allow you to wear them anymore." Fu Yunyi pressed close, right up to the man's nose. "No more glasses. Not during class, not anywhere." Zhou Guangfan's expression changed. "I won't be able to see the lectures clearly," he protested. "No wearing them in class or any time there's someone else around," Fu Yunyi declared firmly. "Fine, fine, fine," Zhou Guangfan compromised. "I'll throw these glasses away. From now on, I'll wear contacts in class, okay?" Fu Yunyi relaxed a bit. "Still close, no need to throw them away. You can wear them when you're going through scripts with me. Otherwise, I'll think you're trying to seduce someone else. Got it?" After saying this, the boy lay down, turned over, and went to sleep with his back to him. Zhou Guangfan scratched his head in confusion, not understanding what caused today's drama. Ah, the young master is indeed the young master. You never know when you'll hit his sensitive and fragile nerve, because the handsome brother looks too enticing with glasses on. The wolfish younger brother's wolf nature burst forth, strictly ordering his brother to wear glasses only in front of him. The next morning, he even made a strange move towards that pair of glasses. That morning, after Zhou Guangfan prepared breakfast, he called Fu Yunyi to eat, but there was no response from the room. The man frowned, went over, and pushed the door open. "Fu Yunyi, time for breakfast." The words died in his throat as he stared at the boy. "What are you doing with my glasses?" Fu Yunyi was taken aback and quickly hid his glasses behind his back, his face displeased. "Don't you know how to knock before coming in?" Zhou Guangfan strides over to the boy, and while the boy is not paying attention, snatches the glasses back. He lifts the glasses to the light to inspect them and asks, "Did you smudge my lenses?" "Who smudged them?" Fu Yunyi's face changes immediately, and he adamantly shouts, "I didn't." Zhou Guangfan's temples twitch slightly. "It's fine, don't worry about it. I'll clean them up." But then, with a sneer, Fu Yunyi retorts, "So what if I did smudge them?" "I didn't smudge yours, what are you so anxious about?" Zhou Guangfan's face turns red with anger as he stammers, "You. Why are you speaking so vulgarly now?" Fu Yunyi takes steps closer to the man as Zhou Guangfan keeps backing away, but after 2 steps, he comes to a halt. Trapped by the wall, with nowhere to retreat, he asks, "What are you doing?" Zhou Guangfan's body tenses up, readying his defenses. Prepare the primary defenses. "I'm just afraid that this unpredictable child might suddenly throw a punch." Fu Yunyi approaches him, and with a slap, he raises his hand to support himself against the wall. He locks the man tightly between his chest and the crook of his arm. This pose. Isn't this the wall pin scene that's often played out on TV? "Teacher Zhou," Fu Yunyi whispers close to his nose, "I'm indecent? You're almost 30, yet you still act pure in front of me." Zhou Guangfan swallows nervously, "I am indeed very pure." Ha! Fu Yunyi chuckles lightly, his eyes like a hawk's fixed on him. Word by word, deliberately he says, "About me rubbing your glasses. It should only be known by heaven, earth, you, and me. If you dare say a word to anyone else, the next thing I rub will definitely not be just your lenses." Zhou Guangfan's back stiffens. It's this casual, nonchalant attitude again. Fu Yunyi shouting isn't scary. But what's scariest is when he threatens you quietly and nonchalantly like this. At times like these, he's definitely a little perverted devil. "I understand," Zhou Guangfan compromises softly, "I absolutely won't mention it to anyone." Fu Yunyi's eyes darken, he lowers his hand, releases the man from his hold, straightens his collar, and says, "Join me for a meal. I have to go for a shoot in a while." After saying this, the young man turns and walks toward the living room, completely unaware that his rival will soon come knocking. Like and follow for the next episode. This man is a good friend of the beautiful brother in the circle. Suddenly he shows up on set and insists on taking the beautiful brother out for drinks. Never mind the drinking. But this arm over the shoulder with the beautiful brother might already have caught the dead stare of a certain pair of eyes. This morning, the filming progress of the crew is all normal. After explaining the script to Fu Yunyi, Zhou Guangfan got into the nanny van and started flipping through the books Fu Yunyi usually read. As he was engrossed, the glass door suddenly banged. Zhou Guangfan turned to look out the window. He saw a familiar face waving at him, calling out, "Guangfan." Zhou Guangfan immediately got out of the car and went to meet him. "Yiheng, what are you doing here?" Fu Yiheng snorted and said, "Didn't you say you were on a business trip? Turns out you didn't leave at all. Are you deliberately avoiding me, not wanting to see me?" Zhou Guangfan chuckled softly, "Sorry, I didn't mean to lie to you. I'm with a film crew and couldn't disclose it." "How did you know I was here?" Fu Yiheng raised his hand and put it around Zhou's shoulder, saying, "A friend of mine saw the former movie emperor shooting an outdoor scene here. I thought I'd come and take a look. I didn't expect you to really be here." Zhou Guangfan acknowledged, "An old friend is filming, and I'm here as his acting coach." "A brother?" Fu Yiheng squinted. "How come I didn't know you had a brother?" Fu Yiheng met Zhou Guangfan in college, so he didn't know about Fu Yunyi. Zhou Guangfan smiled, "Technically, he's not really my brother. We aren't blood related, more like a neighborhood brother." Understanding, Fu Yiheng said, "Oh," and then his eyes gleamed as he leaned in and whispered, "You seem free now. How about we go for a drink? There's a new place downtown." Mr. Zhou suddenly, someone rushed out from the studio, interrupting Fu Yiheng. "Young Master Fu wants you to go over. He said there's a scene he needs you to explain." Zhou Guangfan nodded and waved at Fu Yiheng, "Can't talk now. I have to work. Let's have that drink another day." With that, Zhou Guangfan strode towards the filming site. Fu Yiheng wanted to follow, but Xiao Wang stopped him. "Sir, this is a confidential set. Our young master asks you to stop here." Fu Yiheng's face darkened and he thought, where did this young master come from with such a big attitude, daring to compete with me?" Though he felt annoyed, he didn't act out and turned to leave. At that moment, he still didn't realize that the young master who irritated him had even deeper connections with him. As Zhou Guangfan entered the filming site, Fu Yunyi was sitting in front of the makeup mirror, getting his makeup removed by the artist. "We've finished shooting, haven't we?" Zhou Guangfan walked up to the boy and leaned against the makeup table, puzzled. "We've finished shooting, so why do you want me to explain the scene to you?" Fu Yunyi didn't answer, just leaned quietly against the back of the chair, eyes closed, letting the makeup artist work on his face. "Who made him upset again?" Zhou Guangfan saw that the boy seemed to be sulking and stopped talking, standing quietly by his side waiting for him. A face that's too good-looking can easily be distracting. The little assistant, while helping the handsome boy remove his makeup, got distracted and accidentally got makeup remover in the boy's eyes. Hiss, the boy suddenly took a sharp breath. The girl frantically apologized, "Young Master Fu, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." Fu Yunyi frowned, raised his hand to rub his eye and growled, "Go away, I don't need you to remove it." Zhou Guangfan quickly stepped closer, took the cotton pad from the girl's hand and said, "You go ahead, I'll take care of this." Zhou Guangfan walked to the boy's side, pulled down his hand that was rubbing his eye, and wiped the corner of his eye with a tissue. "The more you rub, the more the makeup remover gets in. Don't move." Fu Yunyi opened his eyes and raised an eyebrow, looking at the man's pupils. "That little girl seems to be scared by me. Aren't you going to comfort her? I remember you always care for women." Zhou Guangfan didn't respond. Seeing the red blood vessels appearing in the boy's eyes, he pressed his lips together and said, "Don't let her come tomorrow. Have the director transfer her to another department." Fu Yunyi looked at him in surprise. "Hey, are you going to fire her? You weren't this heartless before." "Her work attitude is not serious," Zhou Guangfan said as he dabbed some makeup remover on a cotton swab. Carefully wiping the boy's eyebrows, he continued, "Today she got makeup remover in your eye, tomorrow she might hurt your face. If you get hurt, I'll feel bad. We can't use such an assistant." Fu Yunyi's heart felt like it was being kneaded by a big hand, both sour and soft. Although he felt emotional inside, his face remained impassive. She snorted in a self-satisfied way, "You make it sound so sweet, as if you really care about me." Zhou Guangfan sighed, "I'm your brother, not someone else. Is it so strange that I genuinely care about you from the bottom of my heart?" Fu Yunyi's eyes turned slightly cold. If this were said in the past, I don't know how eagerly I would have desired it. But now, "Hey." Out of the blue, Fu Yunyi asked casually, "Before you came here, there was a man looking for you. Who is he?" Zhou Guangfan took a moment to realize and then responded, "A man? Are you talking about Fu Yiheng? He's a good friend of mine." Fu Yunyi frowned slightly, "A good friend? How close?" "Very close," Zhou Guangfan nodded. "We've known each other since college, for about 7 or 8 years. He's probably the closest friend I have." Fu Yunyi's heart tightened. his fingers subconsciously tapping on his knee. After pondering for a while, he suddenly said, "Don't get too close to him. I've seen too many people like him. I've seen plenty of people like him, definitely not the good type. Right?" Zhou Quanfan shook his head. "This guy, apart from being a bit ambitious in his career, is alright elsewhere. At least in the years I've dealt with him, I think he's quite righteous." Zhou Quanfan still didn't take Fu Yanyi's words seriously. "Don't overthink it. After all, you don't know him. Don't be fooled by him." Fu Yanyi's eyes suddenly darkened. "He wouldn't be nice to you for no reason. He definitely has an ulterior motive." Zhou Quanfan pursed his lips, sighed helplessly. "Xiao Yi, he's my friend. I can make my own judgments, okay?" Fu Yanyi's eyes chilled, and he finally slowly let go of the man's hand and clenched his jaw. "Zhou Quanfan, you really won't cry until you see the coffin. I'll let you see what kind of person he really is," Fu Yanyi said, hinting desperately like a younger brother warning his handsome older brother to stay away from that man. The brother only thought it was his personal affair, and the little brother didn't know him. But what he didn't expect was that Fu Yanyi not only knew Fu Yiheng. Fu Yiheng was also a landmine laid unexpectedly by Fu Hongsheng, the eldest of the Fu family. Currently, on Fu Yanyi's desk, there were clear photos of Fu Hongsheng and Fu Yiheng signing contracts behind Fu's father's back, with some close-ups even capturing the details of the contract signing. Looking at the photos, Fu Yanyi scoffed, "My brother is still being fooled by this guy's facade. I will protect him and not allow him to be used by others." He instructed the young man who delivered the photos to keep the negatives, then anonymously sent the photos to his father. The next morning, Zhou Quanfan got up early to prepare his luggage, sunscreen. Zhou Quanfan carefully packed one by one, sun umbrellas, towels. Because according to the plan, he and Fu Yanyi had agreed to go on a vacation to an island together today. But when Zhou Quanfan finished packing, he found no trace of Fu Yanyi in the house. A butler-like man suddenly knocked and entered, saying, "I apologize, Teacher Zhou. The young master had some urgent matters to attend to and will not be able to go to the island with you." After speaking, he presented a matte black card with both hands. "The young master said you can take this card and use it as you please, to enjoy the trip on your own." Zhou Quanfan, feeling dejected, sat on the sofa, sighed silently, and let out a self-mocking laugh. Isn't it normal for him to break a promise? I really don't know what I was expecting. What caused Fu Yanyi to change his plans at the last minute were the photos involving Fu Yiheng and Fu Hongsheng. Fu Wanlin, upon seeing the photos, was so angry that his beard trembled, causing a huge uproar in the Fu family villa early in the morning. He knew that Fu Yiheng's company had problems, and collaborating with him could likely cause significant damage to the entire group's reputation. Fu Wanlin was very angry. He was truly furious because his illusions had been shattered. His highly regarded eldest son had, behind his back, done something so disappointing. He had painstakingly nurtured him for so many years, always believing that this son had most inherited his upright and honest character, but to his utter surprise, he turned out to be a greedy man who would disregard everything at the sight of money. "Get out!" Fu Wanlin roared, throwing his cane at Fu Hongsheng, who was kneeling on the ground. Fu Hongsheng stood up from the ground, lowered his head, and said, "Dad, please don't be angry. It was just a moment of foolishness on my part. Rest assured, I will go and discuss the termination of the contract with Fu Yiheng right away. Get out!" Fu Wanlin roared once more. Fu Hongsheng glanced at Fu Wanlin, then at Fu Yanyi, who had been silent beside him. Eventually, he turned and left. In this battle, Fu Yanyi emerged victorious. Fu Wanlin lost confidence in Fu Hongsheng but started to think highly of Fu Yanyi. He casually handed over the family's subsidiary, Fashion Pictures, to Fu Yanyi. This was Fu Wanlin's test for Fu Yanyi, but it was also the first time Fu Yanyi truly began managing a subsidiary of Huafeng as a member of the Fu family. After handling the handover, Fu Yanyi returned to the hotel arranged by the production crew. He needed to rest and gather his strength. He would reclaim what was his bit by bit, in his own way. A Gia comic commentary. The victorious younger brother Wolf struck a severe blow to the eldest son of the Fu family. When he returned to the hotel, it was already late at night. As soon as he entered the living room, he saw Zhou Quanfan sitting on the sofa, lost in thought. Seeing the man's eyes filled with loss, Fu Yanyi's eyes flickered with guilt, and he subconsciously raised his hand to rub Zhou Quanfan's head and said, "Sorry, I really had something to do today." Feeling the gentle pressure on top of his head, Zhou Quanfan stiffened suddenly. After a moment of silence, he abruptly shook the boy's hand away, his face flushed and his voice rough. "What are you doing?" Fu Yanyi's eyes flickered. "Why such a big reaction? What's wrong with a little rub? Do you find it that annoying?" Zhou Quanfan, with his head down, said, "I didn't say I found it annoying or awkward. The boy felt a sinking in his heart. For some reason, he suddenly recalled the scene a few days ago when Fu Yiheng came to look for Zhou Quanfan at the film set. Their atmosphere was very harmonious. Fu Yiheng naturally lifted his hand and draped it over Zhou Quanfan's shoulder. That gesture was very familiar, clearly done many times before. Being embraced by someone else, Zhou Quanfan showed no sign of resistance and even appeared to enjoy it. Yet, when he simply ruffled his hair, he started acting awkward. "Hey," the boy's eyes cooled, "Teacher Zhou, you are my assistant. I can do whatever I want with you." Zhou Quanfan felt a prickling annoyance, immediately frowning in protest. "I haven't sold myself to you. I'm not your slave." Fu Yunyi sneered slightly, leaning down a bit and gently pressing on the man's shoulder. "Teacher Zhou, go and ask around. Nowadays, which assistant only does work that is reasonable and lawful for their employer? Look at Director Li's assistant. He helps warm the bed, folds blankets, massages, and even occasionally runs to Director Li's room to help with." "Nonsense." Zhou Quanfan abruptly pushed the boy away, standing up from the couch. "How would you know about Director Li's sordid affairs?" Fu Yunyi snorted, tugging at his tie and turning his face away. "I see that Director Li is living quite comfortably. His assistant is obedient and good at massage." Zhou Quanfan widened his eyes. "Who told you all this? Li Yian?" Fu Yunyi shrugged indifferently. "He told me himself." Zhou Quanfan's face turned green with rage. "This Li Yian, not only does he not keep his own life in check, but he also dares to involve you. Did he start these conversations with you on his own initiative?" Fu Yunyi's eyes flickered, then calmly said with eyes downcast, "I wasn't interested in knowing, but he took the initiative to talk to me, kept telling me the details. I didn't want to listen, but he forced me to." Zhou Quanfan's anger reached its peak in an instant. He pointed to the bedroom, suggesting Fu Yunyi to rest first, while he went to the balcony to make a phone call. "Hello, Director Zhou, what's the matter for calling so late at night?" Li Yian's voice came through. "I hope you can stay away from our Xiao Yi," Zhou Quanfan suddenly interrupted. "Director Li, I hope you keep those adult entertainments and pastimes away from him. Director Li, I hope those adult recreational games of yours, don't talk about them with him. He's soft-hearted, and I'm afraid he'll pick up bad habits. I must ensure he's not corrupted by such influences." Li Yian listens with an aggrieved expression. "Oh my, who dares to lead him astray? He's the one who insists on going to my lounge." Zhou Quanfan snorted. "Impossible. Xiao Yi wouldn't do such a thing. I raised him myself, and he's very pure, right?" Li Yian, flustered, asked with a tremulous voice, deliberately saying, "Does Fu Gao think he wouldn't do such a thing? How pure is young Master Fu? How could he know anything about that? How could he go and watch such things? It's all me. It's my predilection to drag him into this. I'm the one who corrupted him. Happy now?" Zhou Quanfan gave a hum of acknowledgement. "It's good that you admit it. I hope you won't do such things in the future. Don't lead my brother astray. This computer contains all of Wolf Brothers' revenge plans." When he returned to his bedroom, he found that the computer had been turned on. He was very nervous, taking advantage of the moment when his brother was on the phone with Director Li. The meticulous Fu Yunyi clicked on the browser, intending to use the browsing history to find out who had touched the computer. He moved the mouse, and the history unfolded one item at a time. What kind of gift should be given to a little star who lacks nothing for his birthday? What kind of birthday gift would seem more sincere? Is it appropriate to use perfume as a birthday gift? Fu Yunyi went through each entry. The records were from 5 or 6 hours ago. The only one who could enter his room and knew his computer's startup password was Zhou Quanfan. Is he planning to celebrate my birthday? Fu Yunyi couldn't help but speculate, because July 31st, which is next Tuesday, happens to be his birthday. So, Quanfan, do you still remember? The boy's eyes were slightly warm as he stared unblinkingly at the browsing history, his eyes filled with a tenderness and depth he didn't even know. He had thought that Zhuo Quanfan had long forgotten. During the 8 years abroad, every birthday he would cling to his phone all day. His number hadn't changed. He was longing, hoping that Zhuo Quanfan would call him, wish him a happy birthday or even just send a message. He would have been so content, but there was nothing. Zhuo Quanfan never sent anything, not once. For 8 years, since the day he left the Zhuo family, Zhuo Quanfan never contacted him again. It seemed like he had completely forgotten him. Fu Yunyi took a deep breath, staring intently at the words birthday gift, feeling an unprecedented bitterness in his heart. It turned out he was mistaken. He wasn't forgotten. Zhuo Quanfan remembered his birthday, his brother remembered his birthday. "Do you want something to eat?" Zhuo Quanfan knocked on the door at that moment. He walked in with a plate of fruit. Fu Yunyi quickly composed himself, closed the web page, and absent-mindedly scrolled the mouse, asking softly, "Did you Did you use my computer today? Zhuo Quanfan paused, then after a moment, realizing, said, "Oh, I did. I forgot my laptop on set. I needed to look something up, so I used yours. I didn't dare touch your folders, so I just used Google to search for some things." Fu Yanyi nodded, a barely noticeable smile forming at the corner of his mouth. He closed the laptop and said softly, "I know you wouldn't touch them, Teacher Zhuo." The boy suddenly looked up, his eyes sparkling. "I really want a set of building blocks, the kind you used to play with me when I was little, the kind that can be used to build a big house with fences and walls, and little people." Zhou Quanfan suddenly remembered that when he first took in Fu Yanyi, he had bought him a set of building blocks. But while playing, Fu Yanyi accidentally pricked his hand with the blocks. His mother not only scolded Zhou Quanfan but also reluctantly confiscated the building blocks. Zhou Quanfan let out a long sigh, reached out, and pulled the boy into his arms, saying, "Those blocks were thrown away by Mom long ago. How could she dare to keep them?" Fu Yanyi buried his face in the man's shoulder and mumbled, "Mr. Zhou, I still want those blocks, the same set as before." Zhou Quanfan patted his shoulder, "Okay, I'll buy them for you. No matter where we go, I'll find you an identical set." Today is Wolf Dog Brothers' birthday, and the scenes on set went very smoothly. But his mood was like riding a roller coaster after an important scene was successfully shot. Li Yanbing's assistant, holding a cup of water, jogged over to support the girl to rest on the side. At this time, Zhou Quanfan did not come over to take care of Fu Yanyi. Instead, he was seen holding a big box, walking away to the side. Fu Yanyi took a few steps and poked Zhou Quanfan's shoulder. "Other people's assistants rush over with water right away. Why didn't you bring me any?" Zhou Quanfan, slightly flustered, hid the box behind him. "Just now, I was a bit busy. I'll go get the water now." Fu Yanyi hooked the corner of his lips in a silent smile. He had actually seen Zhou Quanfan hiding a box with building blocks, so he didn't inquire further. However, a happy smile overflowed on his face. He even lowered his head somewhat frantically and flustered, his ears faintly red as he whispered, "Brother, shall we go out later? Happy birthday to you." The singing suddenly interrupted the boy's words. Fu Yanyi's heart jolted and he abruptly lifted his head. But the staff member holding flowers brushed past him and surrounded Li Yanbing, who was sitting on the lounge chair. "Wow, thank you, everyone." The girl covered her mouth, surprised and delighted, her eyes slightly reddened by the unexpected surprise. Fu Yanyi laughed self-deprecatingly in his heart. He had just been overthinking. He thought the crew was helping him celebrate his birthday. But Fu Yanyi raised his eyes to look at Zhou Quanfan's profile. He didn't need outsiders to remember his birthday. But at this moment, Zhou Quanfan suddenly turned to Fu Yanyi and said, "Xiao Yi, sorry, you go back to the hotel and wait for me. I'll be right back." Then he turned and walked towards Li Yanbing. Fu Yanyi stood as if frozen, not moving an inch. The next second, his heartbeat abruptly quickened because he saw Zhou Quanfan placing that box of building blocks on Li Yanbing's table, smiling and saying, "A birthday gift." Li Yanbing smiled, accepting the box and happily saying, "Thanks." Fu Yanyi's eyes flickered sharply, and quickly his face turned completely pale. The excitement and happiness in my heart shattered in an instant. It turned out that the research he did that day was all for Li Yanbing. Even the Lego he carefully hid was a gift for her. Fu Yanyi lowered his eyes, trembling with anger as he left the set. He felt abandoned by Zhou Quanfan once again. Could he still be taken back this time? Like and comment to see the next episode. I thought it was a gift prepared by my brother for me, but I had to watch as it was given to another woman. The heartbroken younger brother returned to his hotel room alone, walking restlessly and swaying unconsciously, recalling the moment when Zhou Quanfan handed the box to Li Yanbing. Recalling the moment when Zhou Quanfan handed the box to Li Yanbing, the boy felt extremely ironic. What building blocks? What gift? Everything was just my wishful thinking. No one wished me a happy birthday, and no one cared about me. I am just an illegitimate child abandoned by the family, a freak hated by everyone. The room was silent. Fu Yanyi just sat there motionless. I have no family, let alone a brother. Yes, wasn't I abandoned by him 6 years ago? Why, 6 years later, do I still have such unrealistic hopes? Thinking of this, Fu Yanyi could no longer control himself. He grabbed the tablecloth and yanked it hard, causing the tea set on the table to crash to the ground. At this moment, Zhou Quanfan happened to come back, holding a box and a cake in his hands. "Xiaoyi, happy birth." Seeing the mess at the scene, Zhou Quanfan's words got stuck in his throat. What he didn't expect was that the boy suddenly rushed over and swiped his hand, pushing the cake in his hand to the ground. "Why did you come back? Are you going to call Li Yanbing over to continue celebrating the birthday?" But as soon as he said this, Fu Yanyi froze, because on the smashed cake, it clearly said, Happy 19th birthday, Xiaoyi. It's my cake. Fu Yunyi finally calmed down. Zhou Quanfan had no idea where Fu Yunyi's anger came from, thinking it was just a conflict with his family. Anxious, he stepped forward to support Fu Yunyi's shoulders. But just as he was about to ask what had happened, Fu Yunyi suddenly hugged him tightly, opening his mouth with a grievance and said excitedly, "Why have you come back again? Weren't you going to accompany Li Yanbing? Don't you remember my birthday today? And you gave the building blocks I wanted to her." Zhou Quanfan tenderly held the boy's face and said, "What are you talking about? Of course, I remember your birthday. I didn't give your gift to anyone else." After saying that, he opened the box in his hand and took out an exquisite set of building blocks. This set of building blocks was personally made by Zhou Quanfan over several days. Unfortunately, Li Yanbing saw it. Li Yanbing and Fu Yunyi share the same birthday. She liked the exquisite building blocks very much when she saw them, so she proposed to have these building blocks as her birthday gift. Therefore, Zhou Quanfan bought another set of building blocks at the mall and gave them to her on set. And now, this set of building blocks was all personally made by Zhou Quanfan. "Stop crying." Zhou Quanfan kept wiping the wetness from the boy's eyes and said softly, "Your face is all red from crying, you poor thing." Fu Yunyi bit his teeth. "You're the poor thing. I wish all the family members who like and follow us will never be the poor thing, even if they go through ups and downs." In the end, the outcome was not bad. The wolf dog younger brother was once again pulled back from the brink of disaster by the beautiful elder brother. Finally, he had a seemingly normal birthday and received a birthday gift of significant meaning. This set of building blocks also symbolizes my few happy childhood memories. Isn't it very similar to the blocks we used to play with when we were kids? I tried my best to replicate the look from back then and even made two little figures that look a lot like us. Zhou Quanfan seems very satisfied with the fruits of his labor over the past few days. Fu Yunyi now fully understands his misunderstanding. He carefully holds this precious box of building blocks, too moved to speak. Seeing Fu Yunyi's emotions finally stabilize, Zhou Quanfan glances at the cake smashed on the ground and sighs, "The cake is all smashed. How can we continue celebrating like this?" At this moment, Fu Yunyi makes a move that surprises him greatly. He sees him bending down without hesitation and picking up a clean paper plate. He picks up 2 pieces of the smashed cake from the ground. Zhou Quanfan is very aware of Fu Yunyi's severe obsession with cleanliness and quickly tells him not to continue, even if people in the comments say he has selective cleanliness. But he still doesn't want to trouble his dear brother. However, Fu Yunyi continues with a determined look, "This is my cake," until he genuinely happily picks up 2 relatively intact pieces of cake and places them side by side on the table. Then Zhou Quanfan picks up a birthday candle and inserts it in the center of the cake. "There," he says. Zhou Quanfan pats the boy's shoulder. "The candle is lit. Come on, cheer up, make a wish." Fu Yunyi, holding the cake, is very excited, but he isn't too enthusiastic about making a wish. "You make it." "I don't have any wishes." Zhou Quanfan feels a pang in his heart. "How can you not have any wishes? You're only 18 or 19, the perfect age to look forward to the future. Why be so despondent? Come on, blow out the candle and make a wish." Fu Yunyi thinks for a moment. Impatiently blowing out the candles, he made a wish over the cake. "I wish no one else would share my birthday, especially women." Zhou Quanfan was amused and exasperated. "What kind of wish is that?" He sighed and added a wish over the birthday cake. "The wish he made just now doesn't count. I'll make one for him. I wish that he will be safe and sound next year." The two didn't know if they were hungry or in a good mood, but they quickly finished the cake clean. Zhou Quanfan heaved a sigh of relief. "All right, the candles are blown out, the birthday wish is made, and the birthday gift is given. I've accompanied you through the whole birthday experience, right?" Fu Yunyi lowered his eyes and shook his head after a while. "No, that's not right. According to the customs of my hometown, this birthday isn't over yet." Fu Yunyi said as he approached Zhou Quanfan, his expression serious. "My mother is actually a girl from a remote village. When I was young, every birthday my mother would celebrate it according to the ancient customs of our local tribe." Zhou Quanfan nodded in confusion. "Oh, and then?" "Then," Fu Yunyi lowered his eyes flashed and he said, "My grandfather told me that boys in our place, when they turn 19, need to eat some meat, otherwise that thing won't work in the future." "What kind of meat does he need to eat?" Like and follow for the next episode. Presented by Ianju and explained by Zhan Xiao. I thought I had already helped the wolf dog brother celebrate the whole birthday. The youngest brother of the wolf dog suddenly mentioned that in his hometown there's a custom called Dragon Brothers Peak, where men on their 19th birthday must complete a mysterious ritual, otherwise they will become useless. What exactly did the brother say? Fu Yunyi smirked slyly and said, My grandpa told me that when little boys in our place turn 19, they need to eat something meaty, otherwise. That thing won't work anymore. Joe Quang Fan didn't understand at first and replied groggily, eat meat? It's a bit late today. I'll stew some meat for you tomorrow morning. Isn't that the meat you meant? The boy interrupted Joe Quang Fan and whispered. It's that meat. After a moment, Joe Quang Fan suddenly realized and looked at the boy with a face full of shock and disbelief. How could there be such a custom? It's the custom of our place, Fu Yunyi emphasized seriously. Even if the prophecy doesn't come true, I'll still be psychologically scarred. The brother-obsessed Joe Quang Fan bowed his head in distress and thought for a while. Don't overthink it, little Yi, he said. Fu Yunyi showed a touched expression on the surface. On the surface, Fu Yunyi looked moved, thinking to himself, I knew teacher Joe cares about me, while internally calculating not to push him too hard. Hesitating, he then murmured with pursed lips, but it doesn't necessarily have to be done on my birthday, though it shouldn't be delayed for too long. Feeling somewhat relieved, Joe Quang Fan said, good boy, Xiao Yi. Let me think. It's too late today. You go rest, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. Taking the hint, Fu Yunyi tactfully wished Joe Quang Fan a good night, whispering close to his ear, making Joe Quang Fan's ears turn red. Early the next morning, just as Joe Quang Fan got up, he encountered Fu Yunyi, already dressed neatly in the dressing room. Fu Yunyi asked Joe Quang Fan to adjust his tie and softly said, I'll skip breakfast. I have to go to a company meeting. Surprised, Joe Quang Fan frowned, aren't you in the middle of filming? Do you have another job now? Fu Yunyi nodded, bending over to pick up and put on his watch from the table. Fu Wanlin has handed over the management of Fengshang Film and Television Company to me. I'm now the general manager. Joe Quang Fan was taken aback, so now, you have to run between the company and the film crew? That sounds exhausting. Fu Yunyi hummed in acknowledgement, that's nothing. I need to become stronger. Otherwise, I can't protect the people I want to protect. Joe Quang Fan felt a lump in his throat, the little kid who used to be timid and always needed protection. One day said he wanted to protect others. Joe Quang Fan felt a mix of emotions and a sense of pride as if witnessing the growth of his younger brother. Thinking so, he blushed slightly and asked in a low voice, ahem, but didn't you say you needed my help with that thing? Fu Yunyi's eyes shifted, whispering, isn't that something we can only do at night? I'm just worried. Joe Quang Fan tugged at his collar, didn't you say it was urgent? According to that tradition, your birthday has already passed. The boy fell silent for a moment, then chuckled, all right then, Mr. Joe, if you're free, come visit me at the company. Oh my, if you two are gonna be like this during the day, I'll have to start posting videos at night. Aman, quietly hit like, follow, and stay tuned for the next episode. The art of Ajia is wet. This man, in order to help a wolf dog and his brother complete a certain mysterious ritual, obediently went to his company in broad daylight. The time and place are too thrilling. I really dare not post the following content during the day. The company was much more luxurious than he imagined. The grand lobby was bustling with people. Just as he stepped into the building, a beautiful girl in a black professional skirt greeted him and led Joe Quang Fan to the resting area outside the conference room on the 48th floor. Joe Quang Fan and the girl chatted briefly and found out that the company's old employees didn't trust Fu Yunyi much. His job was actually very stressful. Fortunately, these secretaries were completely captivated by his appearance, trusting and admiring him unconditionally. This society really is all about looks. Joe Quang Fan wanted to go to the balcony to get some air, but just 2 steps away, he saw the legendary conference room. The conference room had huge floor-to-ceiling windows. Fu Yunyi was sitting at the front of the long conference table. Looking at his serious profile, Joe Quang Fan felt a slight stir in his heart. It has to be said that his appearance while working was simply too charming. It was this maturity that made Joe Quang Fan feel sympathetic. He shouldn't have to bear so much so early. Whether it's acting or taking over the company, every step Fu Yunyi takes seems to be under Fu Wanlin's control. He has no choice, like a puppet, only passively accepting. Even now, still so naive, he would stay up late to read scripts, shoot under the scorching sun until he gets heat stroke, just to satisfy others. He clearly hates kissing strangers, but for the sake of filming, he would still do it. Actually, he's already very obedient enough to make one's heart ache. Joe Quang Fan thought about it and dozed off on the couch. When Fu Yunyi finished his meeting and came in, he gently nudged him but failed to wake him up, just staring at the man. Joe Quang Fan seems to have lost some weight recently, and Fu Yunyi wondered if his stomach ailment was acting up. He reached out to unbutton the man's shirt to gently cover his stomach, feeling an itch at his waist. Joe Quang Fan suddenly shivered and opened his eyes. You're awake. Fu Yunyi was sitting beside him, trying to appear indifferent. Zhou Guangfan shuddered. Gosh, when did you sit here? I just came over, the boy said lightly. The meeting just ended. Zhou Guangfan responded with an "oh," glancing down at his clothes. When he saw his shirt tail pulled out from his trousers, his expression suddenly panicked. He fumbled with his loose belt and asked, "Did someone mess with my clothes?" The boy raised an eyebrow and seriously said, "Your sleeping posture is not very good. Did you get confused and feel hot in your sleep, pulling it out yourself?" Zhou Guangfan, a bit confused, nodded, Then it must have been me. Saying this, he stood up, loosened his belt, trying to tuck his shirt back in. "Let me help you," the boy suddenly offered earnestly, reaching out to tuck the hem of the man's shirt into his trousers. Zhou Guangfan's face turned awkward as he brushed his hand away. "No need, I can do it myself." "Let me help you," Fu Yanyi insisted, holding onto his belt. "You're too tired." Zhou Guangfan felt a tension in his scalp, about to push the boy away. In a daze, he seemed to hear Fu Yanyi shout, "Brother Guangfan." His body instantly froze. He had forgotten how long it had been since he heard those words. A rush of memories flooded his mind. In the meantime, Fu Yanyi, taking advantage of his distraction, helped the man pull up his pants and tighten the belt. With a click, the hidden button was fastened. Oh my, how did it fasten so quickly? In the next episode. In a daze, he heard the words "Brother Guangfan." His body stiffened as if electrocuted, and the wolfhound brother fastened the hidden button on his pants while he was distracted. Then he stood up and adjusted the man's collar. His clothes were neat and tidy, and Mr. Zhou was still the impeccably dressed Mr. Zhou. Zhou Guangfan forced a smile and softly asked after a moment of silence, "Xiao Yi, what did you call me just now?" "Mr. Zhou," the boy shrugged and turned back, puzzled. "I only call you Mr. Zhou now. Some things, I haven't forgotten that quickly." Zhou Guangfan's chest tightened. Had he just imagined it? "Let's not talk about that," Fu Yanyi changed the subject. "You came to see me today for something important, right?" "Yes," Zhou Guangfan snapped out of it, took out his phone, and said, "The custom you mentioned, I looked it up last night." Fu Yanyi's expression changed slightly. He cleared his throat and said, "You actually looked it up? So, what did it say?" Zhou Guangfan opened a web page on his phone. The custom really did exist. There indeed is this custom. "Xiao Yi, rest assured, I won't let you become a cripple." Fu Yanyi's tense shoulders suddenly relaxed, and he abruptly lifted his head, saying, "I knew it exists. I wouldn't lie to you." Having said that, he walked in front of Zhou Guangfan, placed his hands on him, and said, "Then, Teacher Zhou, let's begin." Zhou Guangfan suddenly pushed the boy away with his hands. "Wait, we haven't found someone who can help you." "Start what? Find someone?" Fu Yanyi's face suddenly turned dark, and he said with a trembling voice, "You're looking for someone else to help me with this?" After speaking, his eyes suddenly darkened. Suddenly, he pushed Zhou Guangfan to the ground. "No need, I don't want to trouble others." "Xiao Yi," Zhou Guangfan yelled in terror, "calm down." But how could he calm down? The boy's breathing began to hasten. With a snap, he tore off the button at the collar of the man's shirt, ripping open his clothes. Staring at the man's chest with red eyes, he said, "Don't move, just be good. I won't hurt you." After speaking, he lowered his head and, like a little bad wolf that had just found food, fiercely bit into the man's shoulder, biting and gnawing wildly. Damn, Zhou Guangfan's heart chilled, and he suddenly lifted his leg, aiming at the boy's abdomen, and pushed him away. Fu Yanyi was caught off guard and with a bang, was pushed off the sofa. "Have you gone mad?" Zhou Guangfan growled, holding his collar. The boy sat on the ground, his expression changing, and he propped himself up on the carpet with a cold snort. "You asked for it. Who made you resist?" "The more you resist, the more excited he gets." Zhou Guangfan's face flushed, he tugged at the collar of his clothes and said softly, "I'm asking you, do you usually have any girls you are very close to, the kind where you have a good impression of her and she also has some interest in you?" "No," the boy replied without hesitation. He said while getting up from the carpet, "I only have you." As he spoke, he suddenly stood up straight. He held the man's wrist and said, "Mr. Zhou, I only have you. Next episode for sure." Although I said this episode for sure, brothers, don't stay up late watching on your phones. Go to bed early. Fu Yanyi picked up the wolf's tail, looking pitiful. Seeing his dejected and pitiful appearance, Zhou Guangfan still couldn't bear it. After all, it was his own lack of consideration just now. How could he entrust such a secret matter to others? Zhou Guangfan reassuringly patted the boy's head. "Xiao Yi, come, brother will help you." Fu Yanyi's dark and intense gaze fixed on the man in front of him. "Is it finally happening?" Zhou Guangfan's voice gradually softened, "But I can only help you like I did that day." Fu Yanyi then smiled slightly and stepped forward, whispering mischievously in Zhou Quangfan's ear, "Mr. Zhou, this mysterious ritual is not that simple. It requires a sufficient price to be paid, a bit more excessive than that day. I know you all don't like to see the wolf-dog brother being too excessive, so this part will be skipped." You can vaguely hear Zhou Quangfan saying "not there," but it's unclear if the wolf-dog brother listens. An hour later, Zhou Quangfan was sitting on the sofa alone with a blank stare, his head hung low. Fu Yunyi, however, emerged from the bathroom in a bathrobe. His spirit rejuvenated, he looked at the man's side profile, noticing the man's eyes were downcast and dull, his firm chin tightly clenched, appearing very aggrieved and confused, as if he had just been harshly bullied. Indeed, that was the case. Thinking of the recent intense and fiery moment, Fu Yunyi's heart softened. He slowly walked over and leaned close to the man. Breathing softly by his ear, he whispered, "Mr. Zhou." Zhou Quangfan shuddered violently, snapping out of his deep thought. In a panic, he lowered his eyes to avoid the boy's gaze and instinctively reached for the tissues on the coffee table, wiping his collarbone and ears haphazardly. Seeing the floor littered with tissue balls, a cold glint flashed in the boy's eyes. Grabbing the man's wrist, he said, "Do you find it dirty?" Zhou Quangfan quickly replied, "No." But Fu Yunyi still didn't let go. "If not, why would you wipe so many times?" Zhou Quangfan lowered his eyes. "I'm just uncomfortable." "Just be honest with me," the boy said calmly. "I know you've always despised me. I can't compare to Li Yanbing." Zhou Quangfan's forehead twitched slightly. "What's this got to do with Li Yanbing?" "I understand," the boy continued. "Li Yanbing is noble and beautiful. She comes from a prestigious family and has a clean background. Unlike me, an illegitimate child with a murky background." "Fu Yunyi," Zhou Quangfan interrupted him with a low growl, "I forbid you to speak of yourself that way." But Fu Yunyi still wouldn't relent. "If she kisses you, would you mind that much? You'd probably be happy about it." "Nonsense." Zhou Quangfan blurted out anxiously, "If it wasn't you, I wouldn't allow anyone else to get close." Fu Yunyi was stunned for a moment, then silently smiled with a raised corner of his lips. It was a genuine smile that he had no intention of hiding. Zhou Quangfan looked at the boy's smiling face speechlessly and sighed, "Are you happy? Competing with a girl over such things. Don't make such comparisons anymore. Li Yanbing is just a friend, and you are family." "Family?" The boy's eyes flickered. Suddenly, he lowered his head and kissed the back of the other's hand. Zhou Quangfan's heart skipped a beat, wanting to pull his hand away, but he couldn't move. Fu Yunyi's grip was strong. "Mr. Zhou," the boy said with his eyes cast down, "you have to be good to me." Zhou Quangfan responded absent-mindedly, "I know." "You don't know." Fu Yunyi suddenly lifted his head, his eyes dark, and said slowly and deliberately, "I want you to be good to me." "Xiao Yi." Zhou Quangfan's heart ached, and he lifted his hand to hold the person tightly. "Fool, you are already an important family member to me." Fu Yunyi smiled silently. It was enough. Regardless of the role, he was the most important person in his heart. That was enough. The relationship between Zhou Quangfan and Fu Yunyi had clearly warmed up. Both of them tacitly decided not to mention the past anymore. They got along with familiar ease, as if they had always been a family and had never been apart. In the last episode, the two finally got together. The younger brother, like a wolf dog, got his wish and bullied his handsome brother. The gloomy past was gradually forgotten. A new day is filled with sunshine. The alarm clock goes off, and it's already 9 o'clock. It's a rare leisurely weekend, and the boy turns off the alarm while lying in bed. He's actually been awake for a while. But he still keeps his eyes closed, ears perked, listening to the sounds around him. He's waiting for his daily treat. It's 9 o'clock. About time for him to come over. Soon enough, the quiet footsteps indeed come closer. Fu Yunyi tenses his shoulders, holds his breath, and closes his eyes tightly. Time to get up. Zhou Quangfan walks over to the bedside and helplessly pats the boy's shoulder. It's after 9.
At this moment, Fu Yunyi had only one thought in his mind, to possess his brother alone, covering all the traces left by others on him, until Zhou Qingfan cried out in pain, which brought Fu Yunyi back to reality. The boy apologetically released his hand and covered his forehead. Every time he thought of his brother with that woman, he couldn't control himself, which drove him mad with jealousy. Zhou Qingfan stepped forward and asked what exactly was wrong with the wolf-dog brother. Suddenly, Fu Yunyi turned around, took his hand, and said earnestly, "Teacher Zhua, I feel terrible. Can you comfort me?" Zhou Qingfan let the boy bury his head into his chest again and asked, puzzled, "How do you want to be comforted?" Fu Yunyi's wolf ears grew out again. He wanted his brother to promise him one thing, which was to like, follow, and watch the next episode. In the handsome brother's bedroom, the wolf-dog brother's possessiveness surged suddenly. After a bout of tearing, He made a request to his brother, Teacher Zhua, after the play is over, move in and live with me. No, Zhuo Qingfan answered very quickly without any hesitation. I'll move in with you, what about Xiao Xiaonan? The boy's face stiffened, let him come along. I don't mind. It's not about whether I mind or not, Zhuo Qingfan explained. Xiao Xiaonan is a child who feels very insecure. He's not comfortable even staying at his aunt's place. When he's sick, he sneaks back to stay with you. I'm afraid he won't adapt. Fu Yunyi picked up the glass on the coffee table and gently rubbed the rim, smiling softly. He feels very insecure, does he? Zhuo Qingfan immediately replied, yes, he has never left me since he was little. But? The boy said with a gaze drooping wearily and a resentful look in his eyes. I also felt very insecure back then. Over the years, you've poured so much effort into Xiao Xiaonan. Have you ever thought about the kind of life I've been living, bringing up those past events? Zhuo Qingfan looked conflicted, yet unsure how to respond. The boy lifted his eyes seriously and continued, Mr. Zhua, could you please pity me and let Xiao Xiaonan move in and live with me? At this, Zhuo Qingfan's expression darkened, and after a long silence, he said, Shoei, it's convenient for us to meet now. Even if we don't move in together, it won't affect anything. Fu Yunyi, agitated upon hearing this, retorted, in the end, between me and your son, you will always prioritize your son. With that, he stood up and walked away. Zhuo Qingfan stepped forward to pull him back. It's not like that. Yunyi, can you give me some time? But Fu Yunyi violently brushed off his hand, his anger flaring, get away. Zhuo Qingfan's heart skipped a beat. What are you fussing about? Why are you arguing with a child? I just want you to care for me like you care for your son. The boy suddenly lost control and yelled out loud. Zhuo Qingfan froze on the spot. Fu Yunyi turned his head, his eyes slightly red, and stared at the man. Well? Can you do it? Can you give half of the attention you give to Xiao Xiaonan to me? Can you give me as much love as you give him? Can you? Zhuo Qingfan looked troubled. Xiao Xiaonan is different from you. He is still a child. Oh, Fu Yunyi interrupted him, so you still can't do it, huh? Saying that you regard me as the most important family member is just your excuse. The boy suddenly turned around. Mr. Zhua, I don't want you anymore. Tomorrow, I will have my assistant send you the termination contract. From now on, we have nothing to do with each other. Saying that, the boy took big steps out of the room and pulled out his car keys, intending to drive away. Zhuo Qingfan quickly went forward to stop him. Stop being ridiculous. You can't leave now. You're not in the state to drive. Mr. Zhua, we have no relationship anymore, the boy said through gritted teeth, pausing between each word. It's none of your business how I drive. I will make it my business, Zhuo Qingfan said, disregarding everything and opening the car door to sit inside. Get lost. Fu Yunyi was furious. Zhuo Qingfan, I'm warning you for the last time, get away. But Zhuo Qingfan just fastened the seatbelt instead. He snorted coldly, and if I don't leave, what can you do to me? Fu Yunyi's eyes became gloomy, and his voice turned hoarse, I will kill you. While stepping hard on the accelerator, Zhuo Qingfan looked at the boy calmly, thinking to himself, just let it be over. It's just your brother's worthless life, do as you please. The aggrieved younger brother drove away from his brother's house at high speed. The worried and handsome older brother forcefully entered the car. At this moment, neither of them realized that danger was already waiting ahead. On the road, Fu Yunyi gradually calmed down. Zhuo Qingfan used the last bit of his phone's battery to contact his aunt to take care of Xiao Xiaonan. Neither of them spoke, and the car drove smoothly until nightfall. When they reached a desolate woodland area, the car suddenly had a flat tire. Fu Yunyi had to stop the car on the roadside, but at the same time, an off-road Mercedes suddenly stopped in front of them, blocking their way. Then, several more cars surrounded them, trapping them. Bang! The car door opened. A man in a brown suit stepped out of the car. It was Fu Yunyi's older brother, Fu Hongsheng. Fu Yunyi immediately realized what was happening and his pupils constricted. He unbuckled the seatbelt and said in a deep voice, stay in the car and don't move. After speaking, he locked the car door and got out. Big brother, the boy strides forward with an upright posture, smiling naturally at the person in front of him. What a coincidence to see you here. Fu Hongsheng raises an eyebrow, his tone darkening. Humph, still pretending, he says, then swings his fist directly at Fu Yunyi. The boy swiftly dodges, agilely avoiding the blow. Fu Hongsheng's eyes narrow fiercely, and he throws another punch, but this time Fu Yunyi easily catches the man's fist, grips his hand and says with a light laugh, Big brother, why so angry? Hitting me won't benefit you. If you leave scars on my face, what would I tell Dad if he asks? Ha! Fu Hongsheng sneers coldly, a bastard born to a village woman, do you really think Dad would care about you? Don't say scars, even if you died, he wouldn't bat an eye. Fu Yunyi's smile freezes on his face. These cutting words, no matter when he hears them, always send shivers through his body. Fu Hongxing's eyes harden as he continues, the intersection is full of my men. Just one shout from me, and you won't be able to escape even if you had wings. Fu Yuni's expression changes, his eyes flickering. At this moment, he's more worried about Zhuo Qingfan in the car. Ah, not laughing anymore, Fu Hongxing observes the boy's blood-drained face and laughs. Scared now, aren't you? No more acting. At that moment, Fu Yuni's eyes flicker, he releases the man's hand and his body relaxes, he lowers his head and says, Big brother, I'm sorry, I was distracted just now. You are my brother, it's right for you to hit me. Fu Hongxing sneers disdainfully. With a vicious kick, he strikes the completely unguarded Fu Yuni on the knee. Fu Yuni falls to the ground on his knees, and Fu Hongxing coldly says, You used Fu Yihang to set a trap with a counterintelligence plan. Using Fu Yihang's plan for a counterplot to sow discord between Dad and me, and conveniently seizing Fengshan film industry, you really deserved that hit, didn't you? Fu Yuni's heart skipped a beat, and he hurriedly raised his voice, Big brother. Who told you that I seized Fengshan? What counterplot? I don't understand at all. Fu Hongxing casually lit a cigarette and put it in his mouth. It's okay if you don't understand now. You'll understand after a beating. After saying that, the man suddenly waved his hand backward. 7 or 8 men in black suits emerged from both sides. Tie him up. Fu Hongxing casually pointed at the boy and said softly. Bring him to the junkyard and find some tough guys to give him a good beating. Fu Yuni knew that struggling now would only harm himself, and also to avoid implicating his brother in the car, he completely gave up resistance, allowing the man to tie his hands with a rope. Seeing the boy about to be taken away, Zhuo Qingfan in the car couldn't bear it any longer and banged on the car window, shouting, Open the door. Let me out. Fu Yuni bit his lip. This fool. Fu Hongxing frowned and looked at Fu Yuni. Do you know the person in the car? Fu Yuni quickly replied, No, I don't. Seeing the flash of panic in the boy's eyes made Fu Hongxing very intrigued. Heh, interesting. My usually stoic brother actually has someone he cares about. Fu Yuni's heart tightened. I said I don't know him. Smash the car door open. Fu Hongxing said calmly. Tie up the person in the car as well. Beat them both together. The wolf dog brother and the beautiful brother were tied up together and taken to an abandoned car factory by the eldest son of the Fu family. So it was the wolf dog brothers' revenge action some time ago that got exposed. The eldest young master of the Fu family is here to get back at him. But the beautiful brother accidentally got involved, making the wolf dog brother extremely furious. Are you an idiot? Fu Yuni gritted his teeth and looked at Zhuo Qingfan, who was thrown in the corner with him, and said, Didn't I tell you to stay in the car and keep quiet? Zhuo Qingfan frowned and shouted, Am I supposed to just watch you get kidnapped and beaten to death? Then what use is it for you to come down? Fu Yuni growled. How is it useless? Zhuo Qingfan glared at him fiercely. At least when you're taking a beating, I'm here with you so you won't be scared. Fu Yuni's eyes flickered, and something in his heart was slightly touched. Just then, the iron door was opened. Several people came in a grand manner. Boss, a man holding a thick iron rod waved it and asked, Which one should we hit first? Nonsense, the boss spat. Hit Fu Yuni first to make a point. Shall we? Don't be afraid, I'm here. Zhuo Qingfan approached to shield him. Move away, Fu Yuni said softly, if you don't want me to hurt more, just stay quiet. The men had already gathered around and started beating Fu Yuni with their fists and sticks. Zhuo Qingfan watched in horror, but Fu Yuni just glared fiercely and silently endured the beating. After a while, the boss lost interest. Enough, bring some tools later. It's no fun when they don't make a sound. The men stopped, pushed Fu Yuni to the ground, and then swaggered away. Zhuo Qingfan immediately stepped forward to help the person up, concerned about his injuries. Fu Yuni said it was just a minor injury. During his years abroad, he was often troubled by people sent by his 2 older brothers. He had long been accustomed to injuries of this level. Zhuo Qingfan still felt sorry for this once so delicate younger brother. At this moment, Fu Yuni lowered his voice and said, I have a blade hidden in my pocket. Take it out and help me cut the rope. Zhuo Qingfan snapped back to reality, found the blade, and cut the rope binding the boy's hands. Fu Yuni successfully freed his hands from the rope. Zhuo Qingfan breathed a sigh of relief and looked up, saying, Shall we, quickly help me untie the rope too? Fu Yuni did not respond, he just kneeled down, holding the blade but not moving. After all, Fu Yuni had once fantasized countless times about tying up Zhuo Qingfan, so he could never leave him again. He just didn't expect that in such a place, his little wish would actually come true. He couldn't help but get a bit excited, his eyes flashing as he stepped forward. He thought he should make good use of this opportunity. What exactly does he want to do? like, comment, and watch the next episode. The wolf dog younger brother had once fantasized countless times about tying up his beautiful older brother so he couldn't leave him. This time, both of them were kidnapped, but it unexpectedly helped him fulfill his wish. A ready tied-up older brother was right in front of him. Looking at Zhuo Qingfan, who was still bound, Fu Yunyi asked again, "Teacher Zhuo, after we get out, can we live together?" Zhuo Qingfan's heart skipped a beat. "Are you crazy? Why are you saying this now?" The boy's eyes turned dark. "Zhuo Qingfan, you're still like this and won't agree to my request." Zhuo Qingfan's anger flared up, gritting his teeth. "Shall we? This is not the time to talk about this. We need to escape as soon as possible." Zhuo Qingfan's repeated refusals made Fu Yunyi's expression gradually eerie. He remained silent for a while, then lowered his hand to touch the man's firm chin, lightly saying, "You're right, Mr. Zhuo, but it's me escaping, not us." Zhuo Qingfan's face changed. "Untie the rope for me." The boy shrugged. "I can untie it, as long as you agree to move." "I'll untie it for you then." Zhuo Qingfan clenched his jaw and said nothing, remaining silent. The boy's eyes, cold as an icy lake, flashed with hatred. He gritted his teeth and sneered, "Fine, you're stubborn. If you don't move, you can stay here." With that, the boy turned and walked out of the factory gate without looking back. Zhuo Qingfan watched his back in disbelief. He couldn't believe Fu Yunyi would really leave him here. Even though they were fighting, in Zhuo Qingfan's eyes, these arguments were just minor disagreements between family members, very normal, not to the point of breaking up. But until the boy disappeared behind the factory gate, Zhuo Qingfan didn't completely realize with a sinking heart that Fu Yunyi truly left him. This ungrateful person really abandoned him here alone. Thinking of this, Zhuo Qingfan was filled with regret, considering how he would teach him a good lesson after getting out. But when he calmed down and thought about it, he felt relieved as long as Fu Yunyi had escaped. He couldn't bear to see him suffer at all. Fu Yunyi didn't actually leave, he just stood behind the door and took out a watch-face-sized mini-phone from the inner pocket of his suit. This was equipment he kept on him for emergencies. Fu Yunyi dialed the emergency number and briefly explained the situation to the police. He glanced again through the door crack at the person sitting on the ground, lost and helpless, feeling both anger and pain. Why be so stubborn? Why is he so stubborn? He had already begged him so humbly, but he remained indifferent. He should let him experience the feeling of being abandoned. Just as Fu Yunyi became more and more furious, he suddenly heard a man scream from behind the door. It was Zhuo Qingfan's voice. Fu Yunyi instinctively pushed open the door and rushed in. Even when the beautiful brother was tied up, he still refused to agree to his demands. The younger brother, like a wolf dog, was extremely frustrated. He hid behind the iron door pretending to leave, but when he suddenly heard a scream from inside the room, the younger brother instinctively pushed open the iron door and rushed in immediately. The scene before him left Fu Yunyi stunned. The reason Zhuo Qingfan suddenly screamed was because of a small mouse that had appeared. Seeing the boy return, Zhuo Qingfan turned his head and growled instead, "Are you crazy? Why did you come back? Why didn't you run away all this time?" Fu Yunyi's expression remained calm. He walked step by step to the man's side. Fu Yunyi initially intended to take revenge on him. He pretended to abandon him so that he could also experience the feeling of being discarded. But who knew that once he encountered trouble, he couldn't control himself and immediately came back to find him. Fu Yunyi squatted down while untying the ropes for Zhuo Qingfan. "You owe me a debt. I will find a chance to get it back from you 100-fold. Zhuo Qingfan moved his wrists that were numb from being tied. "Stop dawdling, let's go, go. Who knows when those people will come back?" Just as he finished speaking, a shout came from behind, "Boss, they're trying to run." Zhuo Qingfan's heart skipped a beat. He quickly stood up, grabbed Fu Yunyi's hand, and tried to turn around and run out. But it was too late. The man outside the door had already rushed in recklessly, raising the iron rod in his hand high above Fu Yunyi's head. As he watched the iron rod about to come down quickly, Zhuo Qingfan's pupils shrank, and he shouted, "No!" His body reacted on reflex, throwing himself onto the boy. Bang! The iron rod fell, smashing directly onto the man's spine. The clear sound of bones breaking exploded in the air. Zhuo Qingfan let out a muffled groan, his body went limp and collapsed. It hurt so much, his internal organs were trembling, but fortunately, it didn't hit Fu Yunyi. Zhuo Qingfan thought dazedly, if it had hit Fu Yunyi, with his proud and noble body, how could he have withstood such pain? Using the last bit of his strength, Zhuo Qingfan weakly urged Fu Yunyi to leave quickly, but before he could finish speaking, his arm fell powerlessly to the ground, and his consciousness gradually plunged into chaos as he passed out. In a daze, he seemed to hear Fu Yunyi screaming till my throat tore, "Bro, wake up. I won't force you anymore, just look at me, please." The last thing heard was the wailing of sirens outside. The handsome brother used his back to shield his wolfhound brother from a vicious iron rod. As he passed out, the police finally arrived at the scene, and the gang of villains hurriedly fled. Zhuo Qingfan was rushed to the hospital, but he continued to be unconscious for 2 days and nights in the hospital, showing no signs of waking. The anxious wolfhound brother was questioning the doctor. Didn't you say he was out of danger? Why hasn't he woken up? The doctor tried to calm him down while explaining that the patient hadn't woken up mainly due to his poor physical condition. The hospital was trying to figure out a solution. Then hurry and think. Fu Yuni said urgently, waving his hand forcefully. With a wave, he knocked a vase on a nearby table to the floor, shattering it, causing the doctor and nurses in front of him to sweat profusely. They promptly said they would go and quickly left the sick room. Does it hurt a lot, bro? Fu Yuni sat by the bed, looking frail, a stark contrast to his fierce demeanor just before. Watching Zhuo Qingfan, who still had his eyes tightly shut, Fu Yuni spoke many words that had been weighing on his heart. Bro, do you remember the mistake I made when we met again? It was my fault. I had someone beat you up on purpose. It must have hurt at that time. Actually, I signaled Li Yan to tell those people not to go too far. I originally thought that seeing you getting beaten would make me feel good, but I was wrong. I regretted my actions very quickly. Afterwards, I immediately checked with them to make sure they didn't go overboard and even had someone else take you to the hospital. But even so, it still caused you irreparable harm. Actually, I was in pain that day too. I was angry at you, tormenting and retaliating against you, just because I wanted you to stay by my side. Brother, I really don't know what I should do to keep you. Fu Yunyi, feeling sentimental, didn't notice that Zhuo Qingfan's fingers had already moved slightly. He was slowly waking up. At this time, Fu Yunyi was still leaning on the man's shoulder, continuing to grievously complain. I hate that you sent me back to the Fu family all those years ago. I hate that you never called me on my birthday over the years. I'm jealous of Qiao Shaonan taking the place that was once mine. I'm afraid that you no longer have a place for me in your heart over these years. By this point, Fu Yunyi was already in tears. But what I'm most afraid of is never seeing you again. I can't be without you. Brother, I'm sorry. Please wake up. Zhuo Qingfan, hearing this, couldn't help but sob as well. Realizing his brother finally reacted, Fu Yunyi's eyes instantly filled with joy. He quickly stood up and loudly called for someone. Doctor, nurse, the patient is awake. Under the attentive care of his younger wolfdog brother, the handsome brother's complexion has noticeably improved. Suddenly, Zhuo Qingfan just smiled and kept staring at Fu Yuni. Fu Yuni felt a bit uneasy and asked, "What, is there something on my face?" Zhuo Qingfan just grinned and said, "I was thinking about how your handsome face looks when you say sorry." Fu Yuni immediately sensed something was amiss and muttered, But then, Zhuo Qingfan, using his acting skills, mimicked the boy's tone from earlier. I hate that you sent me back to the Fu family years ago. I hate that you never called me all these years. I'm jealous of Qiao Shaonan taking my place. I'm afraid that you no longer have a place for me in your heart. Fu Yuni's face turned red instantly, and he protested weakly, I never said those things. Forget it. Zhuo Qingfan, however, proudly said, sorry, but quick memorization is a basic skill for actors. Fu Yuni quickly changed the subject, wake up and reassure everyone soon. I'm about to be annoyed to death by that brat Qiao Shaonan. Only then did Zhuo Qingfan hurriedly call his aunt with his cell phone. The aunt said that Shaonan had already gone to sleep. She also told Zhuo Qingfan that Yuni had been helping to take care of Shaonan these past few days, making it much easier for her. Zhuo Qingfan was taken aback. He didn't expect Fu Yuni to be so thoughtful. After hanging up the phone, he asked him, have you been taking care of Shaonan these past few days? Fu Yuni, while peeling an apple, said, I just go over to keep him company at night. A warm feeling surged in Zhuo Qingfan's heart. It seemed that Fu Yuni was not just talking but actually acting on it. Thinking of this, Zhuo Qingfan couldn't help but smile happily, causing Fu Yuni to ask why he was smiling foolishly again. Zhuo Qingfan reached out to gently tidy Fu Yuni's hair, then touched the boy's head and said tenderly, being hit once brought our well-behaved Xiaoyi back. Seizing the moment, Fu Yuni held the man's hand and said sincerely, brother, can you forgive me for the mistakes I've made before? Zhuo Qingfan smiled with relief, feeling that all his injuries were worth it. With a face full of gentleness, Fu Yuni embraced him, brother, from now on, let me take care of you. The recent upheaval had resolved many of the barriers between them. Zhuo Qingfan then began to ask about the identity of the kidnappers. Fu Yuni still used the excuse that the police were investigating to avoid going into detail. He didn't want his brother to get involved in the family's grudges. When Zhuo Qingfan wanted to ask further, Fu Yuni suddenly took out a medicine bottle from the side. All right, brother, the doctor said it's time for your medication. Lie down quickly. Zhuo Qingfan started unbuttoning his shirt but continued talking about the kidnappers. Xiaoyi, you must tell your brother if anything happens in the future. Fu Yunyi helped the man lift his clothes and assisted him to slowly lie face down, responding, got it. When Fu Yunyi saw the slender waist, the beautiful muscle lines, and the sunken waist dimples, the boy's stomach tightened, and he swallowed hard, his mouth dry. How would the wolf dog little brother help his brother apply the medicine? Happy New Year to everyone. See you in the next episode. It's time to apply the medicine. The handsome brother obediently lies down slowly. When his hospital gown was lifted, the brother's beautiful back made the wolf dog little brother lose his focus, secretly swallowing. Feeling no movement behind him for a long time, Zhuo Qingfan frowned. Xiaoyi? Fu Yunyi snapped back to reality, hurriedly lifted the hospital gown again. When he saw the shocking bruises and purples on the shoulder, the boy's pupils contracted, and an icy cold aura surrounded him, thinking to himself, Fu Hongsheng, it's one thing to provoke me, but to hurt Zhuo Qingfan, this debt, I will make sure you pay it back in blood. Brother, Fu Yunyi gently placed his palm on the wound. I'm going to spread the medicine, bear with it a little. Saying that, the boy's palm began to move. Zhuo Qingfan trembled in pain and hissed. Fu Yunyi furrowed his brow, carefully massaging the wound while casually saying, Brother, I'll remember this grudge for you. Don't worry, I'll make them pay for every bit of suffering you're enduring now. Zhuo Qingfan was in so much pain that he could hardly think of anything else, just grimacing and mumbling, Xiaoyi, gently. Fu Yunyi didn't speak, his heart growing darker. He had originally planned to temporarily spare Fu Hongsheng and give it a rest. After all, Fu Hongsheng had recently caused him to lose Fengshang Entertainment and even got him severely reprimanded by the old master. But now, daring to harm someone he cherished so much was unbearable. No longer needing to hide his intentions, he was determined to crush him completely. As the pain in his back gradually subsided, Zhuo Qingfan slowly relaxed. Xiaoyi, the man whispered, resting his head on the pillow, stop massaging, I feel much better now. You rest a while. Fu Yunyi ceased his movements but did not pull down his clothes. Zhuo Qingfan was lying on his stomach, unable to exert force with his arms, so he frowned slightly and whispered softly, Xiaoyi, help me take off my shirt. No response came, it was quiet behind him. Zhuo Qingfan felt it strange but said nothing more, remaining quietly prone. After a quiet 5 or 6 minutes, the shallow breaths at the small of his back brushed over his heart like feathers, causing his body to tense up. Zhuo Qingfan, unconsciously pressing down on the pillow, panted lightly and gritted his teeth. What are you doing? Fu Yunyi, tracing the man's waistline, murmured, Brother, rest assured, I won't let you suffer in vain. Zhuo Qingfan, feeling a tingling in his scalp, clenched his fists tightly. Xiaoyi, what are you doing? Hurry and help me take off my shirt. I'm applying medicine for you, brother, the boy said, sticking out his tongue and licking the ointment off his finger. Why, don't you like it? Zhuo Qingfan raised his neck, bit his teeth, and pounded the pillow. Get up. Is this how you apply medicine? Who taught you this? Fu Yunyi chuckled lightly, standing up and staring into the man's eyes. It's all written like this in Director Lee's scripts. Didn't you tell me to read more often? Zhuo Qingfan sat up in shock and angrily said, I'll call Director Lee right now. Next time, I definitely won't let you join his team. After the Wolfdog brothers' fancy tongue-assisted medicine administration, the beautiful brother fell asleep comfortably. Seeing this, Fu Yunyi left the hospital and went to the Fu family villa. The villa was brightly lit, with a large round dining table. Fu Wanlin sat in the center, with Fu Yunyi's stepmother, Zhu Shangyun, beside him. Dad, don't wait anymore. Fu Yunyi must have forgotten your birthday long ago. He has always been heartless, said Fu Hongsheng, raising his glass towards Fu Wanlin and loudly said, wishing you health and happiness. We, the brothers, will do our best to support the Fu family. Just take care of your health. Now you see who's filial, right? Someone is just an ungrateful wolf cub. It's a pity you still give him chances, Zhu Shangyun added, the vast Fu family's industry can only rely on these two. Don't count on that ingrate. Second brother Fu Yuanshan was also present today. They were all there to celebrate Fu Wanlin's birthday. Just as they were feeling proud, a crisp voice suddenly sounded from outside the door, Dad. The room fell silent instantly. Everyone at the dining table looked towards the door. When they saw the person standing at the door, their expressions changed. Fu Hongsheng was the most surprised. He didn't expect Fu Yunyi to be standing there unharmed. Today is father's birthday. Of course, I had to come back. Fu Yunyi chuckled, meaningfully saying, Why, did big brother think I wouldn't be able to return? Fu Hongsheng didn't speak, thinking to himself that he had paid those thugs a hefty sum. How could he be unscathed? Could it be that he escaped? Fu Yunyi casually walked over and said, Dad, I am late. Today is your birthday, and I even brought a gift. At this moment, Fu Yuanshan coldly snorted, the best gift would have been if you hadn't come back. Don't you know Dad doesn't want to see you now? Fu Yuni raised an eyebrow and smoothly replied, second brother, you shouldn't say that. If it wasn't for me managing to suppress the matter for big brother, Dad wouldn't have been in the mood to eat today. Upon hearing this, Fu Hongxing panicked and quickly stepped forward. Grabbing Fu Yuni's shoulder, Fu Yuni, stop spreading rumors and causing trouble. However, the boy effortlessly slapped away Fu Hongxing's hand and intentionally said, big brother, you know what you did. I haven't disclosed anything to the police, and those kidnappers were also paid off to keep quiet. Furious, Fu Wanlin immediately lectured Fu Hongxiang, but his concern wasn't for Fu Yuni's safety, rather it was about the incident becoming known to the media and affecting the family's reputation. Seeing this, Chu Shangyun quickly approached, comforting Fu Wanlin by saying that the matter had been properly resolved and there was no need for such anger. Then, turning around, she immediately changed her tone towards Fu Yuni and harshly said, Hongxiang was just joking. If you take it seriously, then you are in the wrong here. Fu Yuni's gaze turned cold, is that so? That joke went too far. I was actually thinking of returning style entertainment to big brother. But now, I am more inclined to give it to second brother. Fu Yuanshan had long coveted style entertainment, his eyes inevitably gleaming at the mention. Chu Shangyun, seeing Fu Yuni's intention, burst out in anger, shouting, stop sowing discord. Stop fighting. Fu Fanlin raised his hand to interrupt them and after a moment of silence, eyes downcast, he solemnly said, Hongxiang, if you want style, you can just tell me directly. The Fu family belongs to you two brothers, but you shouldn't jeopardize the company's reputation. Hongxiang could only frown and dared not answer. Then he turned his head to look at Yuanshan, the fashion trend is nearly on the right track now. Yuanshan, you take over. Yuanshan was suddenly taken aback by this favor. However, Yuni, with a smile on his face, continued to stir, congratulations, second brother. But be careful, big brother has always wanted this company. Watch out for his pranks. At that moment, Shang Yun picked up a glass of red wine and threw it towards Yuni, get out of here. Yuni did not dodge but maintained his smile, happy birthday, Dad. I wish you a long life and endless happiness. His goal for this visit had been achieved. He thought to himself, the real show is yet to come. Look forward to my gift. Since coming out from his father's birthday party, the mentality of the wolfhound brother changed again. He was almost killed by his own brother, yet his father only cared about the family's reputation. His stepmother was still cold and verbally abusive, which deepened the wolfhound brother's desire for revenge. Half a month later, Yuni began to implement his revenge. He had decided to make Hongxiang, the brother who had harmed him, pay the price. The bait he chose was one of Yuanshan's favorite mistresses. They would meet at a masquerade ball arranged by Yuni. After everything was arranged, Fu Yuni felt a mix of excitement and unease, harboring a resolute heart. He came to Zhuo Qingfan's bedroom. By then, it was deep into the night, and Zhuo Qingfan was drowsily drifting off to sleep. Suddenly, he felt a tightness around his waist and shallow breathing in his neck, then a warm body pressed against him. What are you doing? Zhuo Qingfan reacted, abruptly pushing the person clinging to him. Brother, Fu Yuni hugged him tightly, buried his head in the man's shoulder, and whispered, let me hold you in my sleep tonight, okay? I won't do anything else. Zhuo Qingfan's temple twitched. What do you mean? What do you mean by not doing anything else? What else do you want to do? Nothing, the boy muttered, I just want to hold you while I sleep tonight. No, Zhuo Qingfan pushed him away, I'm not used to sleeping with someone else. I can't sleep well, and that's a bad habit. Saying this, the boy tightened his arms, hugging the person in his arms even more tightly and softly said, let me help you change that. Zhuo Qingfan looked at the ceiling speechlessly, how is that a bad habit? I don't want to change it. After finishing, the man frowned and pushed the person away further, loosen your hands a bit. Can you? The boy's voice was low. Stop pushing me, okay? I'm feeling a bit uneasy today. I don't want to sleep alone. Zhuo Qingfan paused, stayed silent for a while, then finally raised his hand. He patted the boy's back and said, what's wrong? Why are you feeling uneasy for no reason? I don't know, Fu Yuni whispered. I'm just feeling restless and uneasy. Holding you makes me feel better. Zhuo Qingfan sighed, then let's cuddle. Fu Yuni made a sound of agreement and tightened the arms around the man's waist, holding him more securely. He knew his plan for tomorrow, whether successful or not, would change the Fu family drastically. Something in his bloodline was stirring his unease. But at this moment, his heart finally started to calm down. After all, as long as his brother was by his side, nothing else really mattered. They both slept soundly and dreamlessly through the night. The next afternoon, Fu Yuni appeared at a masked ball at a restaurant. "Mr. Fu," came the voice of his personal assistant from his phone. "According to your plan, everything is proceeding smoothly. We've already filmed the video of Fu Hongsheng and Fu Yuanshan's mistress in the penthouse suite." Fu Yuni glanced at his phone. The content was very explosive, but unfortunately, it was something everyone disliked watching. He had someone anonymously send the video to Fu Yuanshan, thoughtfully noting the hotel coordinates and room number. He also arranged for a special fruit platter to be delivered to Fu Hongsheng's room. Fu Yuni knew his second brother very well, paranoid, irritable, and stubborn. When something happened, the first reaction was to vent his anger by hitting someone. Fu Yuanshan was drinking at home, venting his emotions, and on the verge of losing control because Chu Shangyun wanted him to return Fengshang films to his older brother. At this moment, he saw this video. At this moment, if he sees this video, he won't believe it. After arranging everything, Axie, the comic narrator, explains that Fu Yuni didn't stay in the restaurant to watch the play but chose to find his brother, Ajuan. It's only by his side that he could calm himself down. The trap set by the younger brother, the wolf dog, was ready. The two older brothers, who had oppressed and harmed him for years, were now fish in his net. But he didn't stay at the scene to witness the cruel end. Instead, he chose to go to his beloved brother. Zhuo Qingfan happened to be back at the university giving a demonstration lecture that day. Fu Yuni, dressed casually, sneaked in through the back door of the classroom. Sitting in the corner at the back of the classroom, Zhuo Qingfan on the podium could naturally see him. His expression unchanged, he continued lecturing naturally. Fu Yuni leaned his head against the wall, intently watching the person talking confidently on the podium. The deep and magnetic voice gradually relaxed his tense body. The boy leaned on the desk, his restless and anxious heart, like a caged wild beast, gradually calmed down as the voice from the podium continued. Like a warm hand, slowly kneading every inch of the folds in his heart, each tremble. The voice in his ears gradually became blurred, and Fu Yuni closed his eyes. He let go of all his anxiety and defenses and fell into a deep sleep. He didn't expect that at this moment, he could still fall asleep. It seems that the peace his brother brought to his heart far exceeded his imagination. "Wake up, wake up!" Fu Yuni was woken up by someone. A Jia man narrated. As soon as he opened his eyes, he saw the handsome face engraved in his heart. "Brother!" The boy suddenly rushed forward, hugged the man tightly, and touched him, saying, "It's great, I dreamed of you again." "Oh my!" Zhuo Qingfan was so scared that his scalp tingled. He hurriedly pushed away the boy who was clinging to him like a big piece of sticky candy. Wake up, come to your senses." He was relieved that class was over and there was no one else in the classroom. "Wake up!" Zhuo Qingfan patted the boy's face. "This is not a dream." After letting go, Fu Yuni stared at the man and smiled. "All right, I won't tease you anymore." He really was pretending. Zhuo Qingfan, a bit annoyed, turned around. "Even kids aren't as childish as you." The boy quietly rested his chin in his hands, watching his brother get angry, thinking how cute he looked when he was mad. He couldn't stand it. He really wanted to destroy all of Zhuo Qingfan's calmness and gentleness, to make his clear eyes confused and frenzied, to make his tall and slender body twist and tremble for him. The more serious Zhuo Qingfan was, the more it made his heart itch unbearably. "Are you very hungry?" Zhuo Qingfan finally couldn't help but ask. "Why do your eyes look like you haven't had meat for days?" Fu Yuni came back to his senses, hiding the heat and possessiveness in his eyes, and coughed lightly. "Yes, I'm really hungry. Brother, I haven't had meat for a long time." Indeed, it had been over a month since his last indulgence on his 19th birthday. Once you've had a taste of such things, you can't stop craving for more, desiring it every day. Fu Yuni was thinking that he had to find an opportunity to deceive his brother again. "Let's go. I know a great restaurant nearby, I'll take you there for some meat," Zhuo Qingfan spoke up, interrupting the boy. He grabbed the boy's wrist and strode out. The car smoothly started and headed towards a barbecue restaurant near the school. Afraid that the silence on the road would make Fu Yuni fall asleep again, Zhuo Qingfan turned on the car radio. The broadcast was playing the news about a serious criminal case in the city center where two men fought over a woman, resulting in one dead and one injured. What was more shocking was that the mastermind behind this criminal case and the victim were the sons of the film industry magnate, Fu Wanlin, chairman of Huafeng, Fu Yuanshan and Fu Hongsheng. Zhuo Qingfan slammed on the brakes with a thud. The car stopped by the roadside. The news on the radio shocked the handsome brother into slamming the brakes. Because the two brothers mentioned in the news fought over a woman, leading to one dead and one injured. And the younger brother of those two was sitting right in the handsome brother's car. The news broadcast continued, revealing that the victim, Fu Hongsheng, was stabbed 19 times and died from his wounds. The mastermind, Fu Yuanshan, due to conclusive evidence and clear criminal facts, had already been arrested by the police. With a click, Fu Yuni turned off the radio and softly said, "Brother, don't listen to these news while driving, it will affect your mood." Zhuo Qingfan's face stiffened for a moment. He turned his head and glared at the boy, saying, "Shall we? Did you know about these things?" The boy's eyes flickered, and he looked natural. "I didn't know just now, but now I do. It seems the car radio is quite useful, and can even broadcast news." "Stop joking," Zhuo Qingfan looked serious. "Tell me the truth. These things have nothing to do with you, right? How could they have anything to do with me?" The boy's eyes were innocent. "I was listening to your lecture all afternoon, I wasn't at the scene when it happened." Zhuo Qingfan suddenly breathed a sigh of relief, his back relaxed a bit. "I got so nervous that it confused me." "Yeah, how could it have anything to do with you? You were with me the whole time." "Brother," Fu Yuni reached out and firmly gripped the man's palm. "Don't be afraid, I wouldn't do such things." Zhuo Qingfan nodded. "I know, my Shoei wouldn't." Fu Yuni nodded. Just as he was speaking, the phone in the boy's pocket suddenly rang. Fu Yuni took out the phone, and the assistant's formal voice came from the other end. "Fu Hongxing's body is currently at Qinghe Hospital. Zhu Shangyun and other members of the Fu family are all present. Do you want to come over now?" Fu Yuni nodded. "I'll head over right away." "What happened?" Zhuo Qingfan leaned over. "What's going on?" "Brother," Fu Yuni suddenly turned around, raised his hand to tug at the man's tie, and kissed his chin lightly, saying, "I have something urgent, can't have dinner with you. Drive home safely and text me when you get there." After saying that, the boy turned around, hurriedly pushed the car door open, and got out. "Hey, Shoei!" Zhuo Qingfan snapped out of his daze, and quickly opened the car door to chase after him. But by the time he got out of the car, the boy had already crossed the street and hailed a taxi, speeding away. "What's going on?" Zhuo Qingfan raised his hand to wipe his chin. Yuni is getting more and more childish. He is so grown up, yet still needs a hug goodbye. He watched the boy disappear with a worried frown, muttering, "You clearly have a car, why wouldn't you let me drive you there? Is there something about Fu Yuni that he shouldn't know? Going there alone, can he really handle the Fu family?" Like and follow to see the next episode. This man was tragically stabbed 19 times by his own brother. His mother cried inconsolably beside his corpse, with only some company directors and relatives from Chu Shangyun's side standing nearby. When Fu Yuni arrived, everyone's face stiffened, and after a brief glance, they consciously stepped back. Previously, they could ignore this obscure illegitimate son of the Fu family. But now, things have changed. He suddenly became the sole heir of Huafeng, and his status is no longer the same. The boy walked behind the woman, bent down to support her shoulders, his face slightly grim as he whispered, "Mom, big brother has passed away. Please restrain your grief." Chu Shangyun's body stiffened suddenly, and when she turned to see it was Fu Yuni, her eyes hardened, and she slapped the boy hard. Fu Yuni dodged quickly, and the slap merely grazed his face. The boy's fair skin now showed a red mark from the light scrape. "Who are you calling Mom?" Chu Shangyun shouted hysterically, her eyes red. "You, a child born out of wedlock, what right do you have to call me Mom?" Everyone around was shocked, but Fu Yuni, with eyes lowered, gently said, "Mom, I know you are heartbroken over big brother's death. I won't take your words to heart." Ah Hai, the most senior director of Huafeng, Lu Changfeng, stepped forward, holding the woman's wrist and said gravely, "We know you are grieving for Hong Shang, but even in grief, you should remain rational. Young Master Yuni is also worried about you grieving too much, hence he speaks kindly. He has only good intentions, why respond with harsh words?" Chu Shangyun's expression changed. She scoffed, "Ha, you really changed sides quickly." Lu Chongfeng's face darkened slightly, and he said anxiously, "Madam, we are also considering the overall situation of the company." Chu Shangyun didn't speak. She just shook off the man's hand and walked step by step to stand in front of Fu Yuni. The boy stood there with his head down, calm and composed from beginning to end, without saying a single harsh word. "Fu Yuni," Chu Shangyun leaned closer to him, gritting her teeth and growling, "Don't pretend to be innocent in front of me. Don't you know what you've done?" Fu Yuni's shoulders stiffened, and he suddenly looked up in shock. "Mom, what are you talking about? I don't understand." "I'm saying you're a murderer," Chu Shangyun shouted. Everyone present gasped in shock, their eyes widening instantly. However, the boy furrowed his brows innocently and said, word by word, with a heavy expression, "Mom, what do you mean? The police have already investigated. It was your second son who stabbed your eldest son to death with a knife. This is an unchangeable fact. You are a murderer. I will kill you." Chu Shangyun finally broke down. She cried and rushed towards the boy, but before she could make any move, she was immediately grabbed and restrained by the people behind her. Seeing that the woman had lost her sanity, Fu Yuni looked at the doctor beside him. My mother is too agitated. Give her a sedative shot. The doctor quickly came over, gave Chu Shangyun a sedative shot, and then took her to the operation table and pulled her out. Chu Shangyun's outburst not only didn't embarrass Fu Yuni but also made several directors see the boy's mature and decisive handling of the situation. They unanimously felt that although the boy was young, he had such a demeanor and would definitely achieve great things in the future. The Fu family's fate was about to change. When the handsome brother finished his bath and came out, it was already 11 o'clock. He was worrying about whether the wolf-dog-like younger brother who suddenly left in the evening was all right. The younger brother finally opened the door and came back. Brother, is there anything to eat? I'm starving. Fu Yuni was exhausted when he returned from the hospital. Yuni, you're back. Zhuo Qingfan's earlier worries vanished. He relaxed and said while drying his hair, Are you very hungry? I'll cook for you now. Seeing his freshly cleaned brother, Fu Yuni's pupils dilated. Speaking softly, I'm indeed very hungry. Bro, it's been a long time since I last ate meat. It's been over a month since I had meat on my birthday. The little wolf wanting meat steps forward, steadying his brother's shoulders. Brother, let me help you blow dry your hair. Aren't you hungry? Zhuo Qingfan doesn't know why Fu Yuni suddenly gazes at him with shining eyes, as if I'm something delicious. No rush. Fu Yuni continues to approach, resting his head on the man's shoulder. Brother, I'm very happy today. The Fu family is now within easy reach for him. But that's not enough. What he wants more is the man right before him. Taking out the hairdryer, Fu Yuni begins to blow dry the man's hair, his long fingers unintentionally touching the earlobe. Gently brushing over the cheek, a tingling sensation suddenly spreads throughout Zhuo Qingfan's body. He suddenly feels his earlobe is itchy. This feeling is strange. Why are brother's ears turning red? Fu Yuni breathes gently by the man's ear, his tender voice throwing Zhuo Qingfan into confusion. Startled, he turns around and pushes Fu Yuni away. I'll do it myself. Yuni, don't always do strange things. It can lead to misunderstandings. The boy frowns, a bit aggrieved. Misunderstanding? What kind of misunderstanding are you talking about, brother? Zhuo Qingfan doesn't know what to say. After thinking for a while he only says, How could I dislike you? It's just that I'm afraid you behave like this with others. Others might misunderstand too. Hearing this, Fu Yuni slightly smiles, leans in, and takes a deep breath from the man's back, immersing himself in the fragrant scent and murmurs softly, I see. Then, from now on, I'll only be like this with brother. Zhuo Qingfan thinks helplessly, it seems the close education for his brother has completely failed. After all, he is also responsible. He finds himself at a loss for words, embarrassedly changing the subject. By the way, Yuni, have you settled all matters regarding the Fu family? Don't you think your brother's affairs are a bit mysterious? The boy looked calm. What's so mysterious about it? Lust is like a knife hanging over your head. The two of them were overwhelmed by desire and couldn't control their greed. They both fell for the same woman. As he spoke, Fu Yuni's expression changed slightly. Fu Yuni's expression changed, he steadied the man by the shoulders and said earnestly, Brother, you understand now, right? How dangerous women can be. Just because of one woman, two old foxes fell. You should take this as a warning and stay away from women in the future. Zhuo Qingfan couldn't help but smile and raised his hand to rub the boy's head, saying, Silly boy, this is just an isolated case. Not all women in the world are bad. There are also many lovely girls who are worth getting to know. For example, in Ajie's comments section, there are many cute, beautiful, and kind girls. Fu Yuni's face darkened, and after a long while, he clenched his jaw and said, But I don't want to get close to them. I only trust you. After saying this, he walked somewhat despondently to the balcony. Zhuo Qingfan watched the boy's retreating figure with some worry. Yuni, the words you said just now. Are you serious? But you will eventually have to be with someone else, right? Fu Yuni did not answer directly, but suddenly asked, Brother, do you still remember the first time we met? This question made Zhuo Qingfan's heart lurch, a deep sense of distress and unease suddenly arose. Memories of the past surged in his mind. My DMs have been flooded by you wolfdog little brothers. But the wolfdog little brother and beautiful brother, who finished their work over the spring festival and are now on vacation, let Ajia take you back to their childhood memories for now. The first time beautiful brother met wolfdog little brother was on a rainy day on the streets. Back then, Fu Yuni was still very young and had been living on the streets for half a year. He survived by rummaging through trash heaps. That day, his findings were meager, just 2 pieces of moldy bread. When Zhuo Qingfan squatted down next to the boy was frightened because the brother wanted him to throw away the little bit of bread he had found with great difficulty. Trembling, he refused, "No, no. You can hit me, but don't take my bread." Seeing the boy's fearful trembling, Zhuo Qingfan felt a pang of sorrow. He couldn't imagine what this little boy had been through. He took out a fresh sandwich from his bag and handed it over. "Don't be afraid. I won't hit you, and I won't take your bread. Brother invites you to eat this, throw the bad one away, okay? Otherwise, it might upset your stomach." Little Fu Yunyi then cautiously accepted the sandwich and immediately started gobbling it down. Zhuo Qingfan hurriedly gave him water and patted his back to prevent him from choking. Zhuo Qingfan was reminded again of the bruises and scars on Fu Yunyi when he first brought him home. Waking from his reverie, he murmured with emotion, "And back then, you were covered in wounds." Fu Yunyi, with teary eyes, told Zhuo Qingfan, "I told you I got lost before, but actually, that wasn't true. That year, I was intentionally abandoned by Chu Shangyun. She had already set up the police station, hoping I would perish on my own." Hearing this, Zhuo Qingfan was shocked. He now deeply realized the hardships Fu Yunyi had faced. Upon reflecting, Fu Yunyi had mostly brought him pain and misfortune through women over these years. His mother had him out of wedlock and abandoned him to die when he was 3 or 4 years old. After that, he was shuffled back to the Fu family. Being alone and helpless, he was also hated and tormented by his stepmother, Chu Shangyun. Thus, in his eyes, women symbolized pain. So this was the reason Yunyi resisted contact with women. At this moment, Zhuo Qingfan's understanding of the boy deepened. "Your mother must have really loved you." Zhuo Qingfan gently patted the boy's shoulder, mumbling softly, "And our mother, she loved you too. You must believe that both of them are in heaven, watching over and protecting you." Fu Yunyi interrupted the man, "Brother, you'll also stay with me for a lifetime, right?" Zhuo Qingfan felt something off about this statement but, after a moment's thought, nodded and said, "Until you overcome your fear of girls, I guess I'll just have to stick with you." Fu Yunyi, reassured, blinked twice, then turned his head and said, "Brother, I don't care about Xiao Xiaonan anymore. If you miss him, bring him over." All right, Zhuo Qingfan was relieved that the boy had finally overcome a psychological barrier. His wolf-dog brother had indeed opened up a lot. They had missed 8 years together, the past was past. After all, from now on, both his body and heart would be his. After the vacation, the handsome brother went to his aunt's house to pick up little Pumpkin to Fu's house. "Daddy, where are we going?" Xiao Xiaonan leaned on the headboard, staring with big eyes at Zhuo Qingfan. While folding clothes for the child, Zhuo Qingfan softly said, "We're moving. Daddy is taking you to a new home." After thinking for a while, Xiao Xiaonan's eyes lit up, and he suddenly raised his voice, "Daddy, are we going to the handsome brother's house who bought me the water gun?" Zhuo Qingfan was stunned. "How did you know?" "I guessed." The child proudly puffed up his shoulders. "Last time that brother came to our house, I could tell when you two were arguing. You two still have to entangle with each other." Zhuo Qingfan was shocked. "What entanglement? Who taught you this word? You shouldn't have this vocabulary in the 1st grade of elementary school." "I learned it from the TV, Xiao Xiaonan puffed up his chest. "On TV, two people who always argue will always entangle with each other. Only." The child lowered his head, frowning slightly in confusion. "On TV, the people also kiss, and the ones who entangle with each other are always a man and a woman. Daddy and brother are both men." Zhuo Qingfan, between laughter and tears, seriously said, "All right, you're not allowed to watch TV anymore. Daddy has something serious to tell you." Little Pumpkin obediently asked, "Daddy, what is it?" That brother's house is very big. After we get there, little Nan can't run around randomly, nor speak loudly, and must not disturb the brother's rest." The child nodded vigorously, "Yes sir, understood." And, Zhuo Qingfan added, "Which is also the most important, that brother has a cleanliness obsession. Little Nan must not touch him randomly." Little Nan hummed, "Understood." Zhuo Qingfan was still a bit scared. He always remembered that day when Xiao Xiaonan just tugged on Fu Yunyi's coat. He suddenly pushed the child to the ground. Therefore, even though Fu Yunyi said he would treat Xiaonan as his own child, he still felt afraid. So, he made sure to tell Xiao Xiaonan in advance to try to stay away from that brother. Zhuo Qingfan even deliberately waited until dusk to take Xiao Xiaonan to the villa where Fu Yunyi lived. He thought that at this time, Fu Yunyi should be having a meeting at the company and planned to let Xiaonan get familiar with the environment first. "I wanted to take Xiaonan to get familiar with the environment and teach him some rules, but I didn't expect that as soon as I opened the door, I saw Fu Yunyi." "Brother," Fu Yunyi said, surprised, putting the folder on the table and standing up. "You brought Xiaonan back so quickly?" Zhuo Qingfan was stunned, not yet able to speak. The child beside him suddenly sweetly called out, "Brother." Zhuo Qingfan's heart skipped a beat as he silently screamed inside, "My son, didn't we agree not to speak carelessly? Why are you so excited?" Xiaonan had grown taller, and to Zhuo Qingfan's surprise, Fu Yuni showed no sign of impatience, his eyes full of warmth and smiles. Perhaps noticing Fu Yuni's friendly attitude and lack of dislike, Xiaonan's courage surged. He suddenly let go of Zhuo Qingfan's hand, spread his arms, and rushed over. "Brother, you're still so good-looking. Xiaonan really missed you." Zhuo Qingfan's face turned ashen, watching the little meatball run over, a storm of thoughts swirling in his mind. Why is this little one's infatuation so severe? He really can't see a good-looking person without going crazy. Oh no! As the little meatball was about to jump into Fu Yuni's arms, Zhuo Qingfan's heart raced, thinking, last time he touched his clothes, he was pushed down. This time, won't he be flung away? Infatuated Xiaonan couldn't control himself upon seeing the handsome elder brother and rushed in for a hug. The beautiful elder brother watched anxiously, worried that the wolf-like younger brother, who disliked children, would fling Xiaonan away. But that didn't happen. Instead, Fu Yuni smiled, bent down, and caught the little meatball, lifting him effortlessly with one hand and pinching his chubby cheeks. Not bad, it's only been a few days, and our Xiaonan has gained weight. Zhuo Qingfan stared in shock. What is this? And our Xiaonan, since when did they get so close? Didn't Fu Yuni dislike children? Zhuo Qingfan was still dazed when Fu Yuni suddenly turned around. Brother, I'll go upstairs first. I left work early today to set up a room for Xiaonan. I'll take him to have a look. Oh yeah. Xiaonan cheered, pumping his fist in the air. Xiaonan has his own new room. Thank you, brother. After speaking, the child smacked Fu Yuni's face with a kiss. Zhuo Qingfan was shocked again. Fu Yuni had a cleanliness obsession and couldn't stand being kissed by strangers. Xiaonan, Zhuo Qingfan shouted, frowning. What did Daddy tell you? You can't disturb your brother, and you definitely can't kiss him randomly. Xiaonan's face fell after being scolded and he whimpered without saying anything. Brother, Fu Yuni rubbed the child's back and said, why are you yelling at him? He kissed me because he likes me. After saying that, he picked up Xiaonan and headed upstairs. Xiaonan, be good. Let's not pay attention to your dad. Zhuo Qingfan stared at his back, opened his mouth to say something, but swallowed the words. Wow, as soon as the door opened, Xiaonan exclaimed. He wriggled his body and said, brother, put me down quickly. Fu Yuni bent down and put the child on the ground. The child screamed and plunged into the pile of toys on the bed. Not only the bed, but also the cabinets and the floor were covered with toys like trucks, robots, water guns, and various Ultraman and Boonie Bears figures. Do you like it? Fu Yuni sat on the edge of the bed and asked, looking at the boy's excited, flushed face. I like it, Xiaonan nodded enthusiastically while playing with a toy truck. Fu Yuni's eyes glimmered slightly. Xiaonan, you like toys, but you must also like your brother, understand? In the future, I will be with your dad for a lifetime. You are his son. You don't have to call me dad, but in your heart, you must treat me as a dad. The child scratched the back of his head. But Xiaonan only has one dad. Now he has two. Fu Yuni grabbed his hand tightly, pointed to his own nose, and said, one is me. The child was stunned for a moment, then suddenly laughed and said, brother, how can you be a dad? You're not even that old. But dad has raised me for many years. Brother, you haven't raised me at all. Fu Yuni was suddenly speechless, realizing he was at a loss for words because of a child. Brother, the child looked at him with bright, sparkling eyes. What do you want to say? Forget it, Fu Yuni waved his hand and said, there's plenty of time. I'll raise you a few years and then you can change what you call me. After calming down the two men at home, the younger brother, a wolf dog, began to make a grand display at the company. Fu Yuni worked non-stop for more than a month, finally bringing the company out of chaos. His decisive and effective execution over the past month, along with his outstanding leadership abilities, was noticed by the company's senior figures. The ordinary employees' attitudes towards Fu Yuni shifted from distrust and disdain to recognition and trust. Eventually, in an anonymous vote, he became the interim director with the highest number of votes, temporarily taking over Fu Wanlin's position. Just after the election, an unexpected guest arrived at Fu Yuni's office. With a somber expression, Fu Yuni said, Aunt Chu, the board's decision should be very clear by now. Is there anything else? Can't I just talk to my son? Chu Shangyun snorted coldly. Of course you can, Fu Yuni replied calmly. If you want to talk to your son, I can call the warden and arrange for you to visit him earlier next month. Fu Yuni, don't be ungrateful. Chu Shangyun was instantly infuriated. And Fu Yuni looked at his watch impatiently and said, "What exactly do you want to say?" Chu Shangyun combed his breath and gritted his teeth. "I heard that a child has moved into your villa." A boy with a sinister look in his eyes and a chilly voice said, "Chu Shangyun, if you know what's good for you, you'd better not look at those two. If you have any thoughts of harming them, I will make sure you won't even know how you died." His voice was too chilly. Even though Chu Shangyun didn't want to be at a disadvantage, he was still so shocked that his heart skipped a beat. "Well, seems like those two are quite important to you," the woman said softly, suppressing her fear. A boy scoffed, "Still not as important as brother Hongsheng and brother Yuanshan. I shed quite a few tears when brother Hongsheng died and brother Yuanshan was imprisoned." Once again, Chu Shangyun's toes were stepped on harshly, making her eyes redden. She took a deep breath for a long while and finally said, "You little beep, I won't deal with you, but evildoers will grind each other. You will have your retribution." Fu Yuni responded casually, "This phrase suits you better, and moreover, it's more applicable to you. I hope the next time we meet, heaven will have fulfilled this saying for you." At this moment, the company's security personnel had also arrived and escorted Chu Shangyun out, leaving behind only her resentful roar from outside the door. "Just you wait, after I settle the family business, you'll see my so-called lapdog brother working overtime." After returning to the film crew for a while, the TV show finally wrapped up smoothly. That evening, the crew arranged a wrap party. The boy took down a suit from the clothes rack and, after trying it on Zhuo Qingfan a couple of times, said, "Brother, this suits you well. You should wear this." Zhuo Qingfan replied, "You even prepared a suit for me." "Yes," the boy said earnestly, "let's go together." Zhuo Qingfan looked at the clothes in his hand and asked, "Aren't these clothes too extravagant? Tonight, you should be the unique one. Wouldn't I be stealing your thunder?" Fu Yuni gently walked behind the man and said, "Would you, brother? Look, we wear matching outfits and a series of accessories. We look unified. I just want the whole world to know that only you deserve to stand by my side." Saying so, Fu Yuni swiftly moved from behind Zhuo Qingfan to his front, pressing close and asked, "What do you think, brother? Do you want me to lower my standards to accompany you?" Zhuo Qingfan stepped back, pushing the man away. "That's not what I meant." Then he quickly picked up the clothes and ran off to change. Not long after, Zhuo Qingfan came out dressed up, marveling at how long it had been since he last dressed so formally, when suddenly the door clicked open. Zhuo Qingfan straightened up and looked in the direction of the voice. Just one glance and his heart skipped a beat. He used to think that the man was as elegant as jade, with a celestial demeanor that was untouchable. But now, he seemed more like a seductive demon. "Brother," the boy looked at the man who was staring intently at his face and smiled lightly. "Do I look good?" His smile could topple a city. Zhuo Qingfan was momentarily dazed, raised his hand to his chest, and felt his heart nearly paralyzed by the boy's faint smile. Good looking? More than good looking, he was absolutely captivating. Fu Yuni's eyes were full of laughter as he walked over, leaned in front of Zhuo Qingfan, and fiddled with the pocket square on his chest. "Brother, how do you fold this handkerchief? I can never get it right." Zhuo Qingfan snapped out of his trance, looked at the crumpled handkerchief in the boy's suit pocket, and said, "That's not how you do it. You need to fold it into a fixed shape before putting it in." Fu Yuni lowered his hand. "Brother, can you do it for me?" Zhuo Qingfan murmured in assent, pulled out the satin handkerchief, folded it, and tucked it back in. He even carefully pressed down on the pocket to set the handkerchief in place. While pressing, he couldn't avoid touching the boy's chest. That feeling. It made Zhuo Qingfan lose focus for 3.14 seconds. Do you want to know exactly how it felt? Like and follow to watch the next episode. When the handsome brother helped the wolfish younger brother tidy his pocket square, he accidentally touched the boy's chest. The surprising sensation made the man freeze. His first impression was that it was very hard. The chest muscles were as tough as stone. He never would have thought that this slender, ethereal brother would have such muscles. "Brother," the boy grasped Zhuo Qingfan's hand and pressed it against his chest again. Zhuo Qingfan was stunned for 2 seconds and suddenly felt very flustered. He struggled to pull his wrist back but couldn't move it. Fu Yuni's grip was very strong, like a vice. "Brother, you always said I was thin, so now I work out every day," the boy said, holding onto the other's wrist. Sneaking in through the collar of the suit, resting on the chest, and moving twice only separated by the thin shirt fabric, he said, "Bro, feel this. Do you think I'm firm now?" Zhuo Qingfan felt his hand burning. No, not the hand, but his heart skipping a beat. Fortunately, Zhuo Qingfan struggled fiercely, shaking off the boy's hand, and said calmly while looking down, "I get it, let go." But Fu Yuni pulled the man closer again, fixing his gaze into the man's eyes. "You're brushing me off too casually, brother. Did you not feel it? Try again." As he spoke, he suddenly bent down and whispered in the other's face, "The perfume I sprayed today is also your favorite scent." The boy's scent, with a hint of icy mint, enveloped Zhuo Qingfan's nose. The man's heart fluttered, and he quickly brushed off the boy's hand, looking away. "All right, why are you still showing off like a child?" Seeing the blush on the man's ears, Fu Yuni said with pleasure in a low voice, "It's not showing off. I want to tell brother that I've been behaving." Suddenly, a cool breeze from outside came in. Zhuo Qingfan shivered and snapped back to reality, pushing the boy away. "Enough, don't waste time. Let me get ready, and then we'll go." After speaking, he escaped to the bathroom like fleeing. Zhuo Qingfan cooled his flushed cheeks with cold water, and his forced calm demeanor also faded. His eyes were full of confusion and helplessness. Was their conversation just now really like the mode of chatting between brothers? After pondering for a while, the man took out his phone from his pocket, opened a Jai's fan group, and typed a message. "My younger brother always intentionally or unintentionally kisses or touches me. May I ask everyone, is this a normal behavior?" As soon as he sent the message, Fu Yuni's phone started buzzing. It turned out he was also in a Jai's fan group and had set Zhuo Qingfan as a special concern. So whenever Zhuo Qingfan spoke, he would immediately get notified. Maybe everyone is busy with their winter break homework. When the message came out, only a few kids who never do their homework replied to him. "Xiaoxiu's loyal follower but doesn't mind stirring trouble. Don't ask anymore, your brother has fallen for you, ha." As shocking replies keep popping up, Zhuo Qingfan becomes more and more frightened, not knowing what to do. Suddenly, a different reply pops up. What does it say? Like and comment to see in the next episode. Facing his brother's relentless pursuit, the handsome brother is finally getting overwhelmed. So, he seeks help in a GS fan club, but the mischievous kids there only make things worse, scaring the handsome brother into trembling. Fortunately, at this moment, a mysterious person comes online. A user named Little Red Riding Hood's Big Bad Wolf says, "Don't listen to them, they just enjoy the drama." Are you talking about your biological brother? How old is he? Zhuo Qingfan thinks and replies, "Not biological, but I've watched him grow up since he was a child. To me, he is like a real brother." He's younger, 19. Little Red Riding Hood's Big Bad Wolf then asks, "Are you married, brother?" Zhuo Qingfan types back, "Not married yet. But I have a kid with me." The reply comes quickly, "Nonsense, as a father, you should understand boys mature late. Insensitive to physical contact, kissing, hugging, and lifting high is just to express brotherly love." Zhuo Qingfan breathed a sigh of relief. Was I overthinking it? Luckily it's just brotherly affection. But at this moment, Xiaoxiu's licking dog jumped out again. "Brother, don't doubt it, your little brother just likes you." Stupid T also added fuel to the fire. "Brother, stop deceiving yourself." Mo Yen was straightforward. "I think from the brother's description, his little brother is also not normal." Zhuo Qingfan's heart was in his throat again. Could Yuni really have feelings for me? The big bad wolf of Little Red Riding Hood came out to save the day again. "Brother, don't listen to these people. You don't have to be afraid. A kiss between men won't get you pregnant. Don't mind these little details too much. Your little brother definitely didn't think too much about it." Then, with a few clicks on the keyboard, he temporarily locked several troublemaking accounts into the little black room. The group suddenly quieted down. Looking at Little Red Riding Hood's last reply, Zhuo Qingfan finally felt a bit more relieved. Indeed, what's the point of two grown men overthinking? Moreover, he has a child. Even if Xiaoi likes men, he wouldn't like me. They are brothers, he wouldn't think in that direction. Zhuo Qingfan chuckled and slapped himself on the back of the head, cursing himself for overthinking. Finally free from worries, who exactly is this Little Red Riding Hood, who effortlessly turned the tide and eased brothers' worries? As usual, we'll reveal in the next episode. Many friends think Little Red Riding Hood is the wolf dog brother. Congratulations, you all guessed wrong. The truth was immediately revealed in the phone call the German Shepherd brother answered. A crisp male voice came from the other end of the phone. "I have talked to him as you instructed. I am the one with the ID Little Red Riding Hood." Fu Yini said in a deep voice, "Thank you, Xin Li. You did a great job." This Xin Li was Fu Yuni's best roommate when he was studying abroad. Xin Li pursed his lips and said, "No problem. We're friends, after all. It wasn't difficult. This is the Zhuo Qingfan you used to call out for in your dreams back then, right? When you were drunk, you always muttered Zhuo Qingfan's name and then cursed. You would cry while cursing, like a child, burying your face in the blanket and sobbing." Fu Yuni's face changed and he said in a deep voice, "Sorry, you must have heard wrong. I never cry." Xin Li shrugged, "Maybe I heard wrong." He then chuckled and continued, "As a friend, I'll try to lead Mr. Zhuo astray for you, getting any benefits I can for you. I hope you can soon win the beauty's heart. Fu Yuni's expression softened slightly as he replied, thank you. Over the years, Xianli was probably the only one who knew about this feeling in his heart. But, Xianli paused and asked in confusion, why don't you reply to him directly yourself? Why must you call me to reply to him? I can't reply, Fu Yuni said softly after a moment of silence. My ID name is I love my brother. There was a long silence. Xianli eventually suppressed his laughter and said, Mr. Fu, just how much do you love your brother? To show off your love, you even chose such a cheesy name. The boy's face turned a bit embarrassed as he glanced at the bedroom door and said, you haven't experienced it, so you wouldn't understand. Xianli shook his head, alright, I don't understand. I shouldn't have asked. I got fed with dog food. He sighed and hung up the phone. At this moment, a pair of beautiful high heels stepped on the stairs outside the door. The visitor was Li Yanbing. She came to pick up Zhuo Qingfan to attend the wrap party of the film crew. Little Pumpkin ran to Zhuo Qingfan's door and shouted, Daddy, there's a pretty auntie outside calling for you. Zhuo Qingfan guessed it was someone from the crew and dropped the half-tied tie for Fu Yuni, then went downstairs to open the door. Fu Yuni snorted disdainfully, couldn't be punctual? Then he picked up Little Pumpkin. Little Pumpkin, we have an unexpected guest at home. Brother will take you downstairs. Zhuo Qingfan was greeting Li Yanbing downstairs when a crisp voice called out from upstairs, Daddy. Li Yanbing was suddenly startled and thought to herself, Daddy? Does Zhuo Qingfan already have a child? And when she looked up, she was even more puzzled, why is Fu Yuni here too? Li Yanbing came today with an important purpose of picking up Zhuo Qingfan. Can anyone guess what she wants to do? To celebrate the kids finally going back to school, I have a surprise for everyone today. The wolf dog brother who guessed Li Yanbing's intentions did not show weakness, strongly declaring his sovereignty. The series of scenes and accidents on the road eventually made Li Yanbing, who was originally prepared to express herself to Fu Yuni and Zhuo Qingfan, back off. Fu Yuni's willful coercion made her brother walk the red carpet with her. Holding her brother's hand, the little wolf dog's mind was filled with scenes you wouldn't like to see. The incident of the two walking the red carpet immediately trended online, and some extreme fans actually attacked Zhuo Qingfan with their keyboards. Fu Yuni then announced his withdrawal from the industry, and the family of three finally had time to realize their plan of a seaside trip. With the divine assistance of Xiao Xiaonan, the two finally officially and properly made up. But just then Fu Weiheng appeared again. He secretly took photos of the two and handed them over to the Fu family. Greatly infuriated, Fu Wanlin forced Fu Yuni to lie, saying that everything was just a bet with someone else. Zhuo Qingfan, who was just playing around, was deliberately let outside by Fu Weiheng. Hearing this, he was very upset when Fu Weiheng took advantage of the situation. Fu Weiheng then gave Zhuo Qingfan some unclean alcohol. Just as he was about to succeed, Fu Yuni arrived at the scene and saved his brother. To prevent his brother from running off, he even tied him up. Just when Fu Yuni was about to act overbearingly, Zhuo Qingfan's drug reaction kicked in, and the two of them ended up tightly. The next day, Zhuo Qingfan woke up feeling very annoyed and decisively left the boy. Fu Weiheng, like a lingering ghost, found him again, and tried to forcefully confess his feelings. During their argument, Zhuo Qingfan learned the truth about what happened the previous night. Faced with a good friend's ulterior motives and Yuni's unwelcoming feelings toward him, Zhuo Qingfan eventually fell seriously ill. After recovering, he just wanted to lead a simple life, returning quietly to teaching at school, but Fu Weiheng still wouldn't give up. Once again, conspiring with a female student to falsely accuse Zhuo Qingfan of unspoken rules, hoping to blackmail the handsome brother into submission. Fortunately, the younger brother, acting like a loyal dog, became the school's largest shareholder with his financial capability, and also found strong evidence to clear Zhuo Qingfan's name. The boy continued to secretly protect his brother and finally received the man's forgiveness. But fate likes to play tricks. A sudden landslide accident severely injured Fu Yuni. This time, it was Zhuo Qingfan's turn to awaken him. Having survived the disaster, Fu Yuni finally realized that love cannot be forced. I'm willing to just watch over you, even if it means loving without reciprocation, even if filled with emptiness and confusion every day, even if enduring the torment of desire every night. Fortunately, Xianli appeared at this time. With some clever maneuvers, Xianli forced Zhuo Qingfan to overturn the hidden jealousy in his heart. Along with Xiao Xiaonan's strict teaching, Zhuo Qingfan finally wavered and completely indulged himself for once. Fu Yuni also seized the opportunity to strike back fiercely. It wasn't until Xianli and Fu Yuni pulled out the fake marriage trick that the indecisive Zhuo Qingfan finally made up his mind. Running to the church to snatch away Xiaolang, he finally clearly understood his own feelings. The two decided never to part again. Ah chow, it was just too sweet in the end. Everyone must go read the original manga. Thank you all for witnessing the hardships of the wolf dog. The younger brother and the beauty brother have gone through together. Due to copyright issues, we had a rushed finale today. Throw flowers. Hope everyone continues to support Ajay. Thank you, everyone. Like, follow, and stay tuned for the next part.